The moment Evan Hale's eyes locked with his boss's on that crowded beach, he knew his career was over. Not because of the quarterly reports he'd submitted late or the client pitch he'd fumbled last month, but because of what he'd just accidentally seen when the wind caught Vivian Hart's beach wrap at precisely the wrong second. His 6-year-old son was building sandcastles 3 feet away, oblivious to the fact that his father had just committed professional suicide on what was supposed to be their perfect day off. Before we dive into how one innocent beach trip became the turning point in Evan's entire life, drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you're already hooked, hit that like button so I know you're ready for this journey. Trust me, you'll want to stick around until the end of this one. Evan had been awake since 5:30 that morning, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that he'd woken up smiling, his phone alarm playing something upbeat instead of the aggressive buzzer he normally needed to drag himself into consciousness. Today was Saturday. Today was his day with Miles. Today, the spreadsheets and design specifications and client demands could all go straight to hell. He'd padded down the hallway of his modest 2-bedroom apartment in his bare feet, pushing open the door to Miles's room as quietly as he could manage. His son was already awake, of course, 6 years old and incapable of sleeping past dawn on weekends, sitting cross-legged on his bed with a picture book spread across his knees. "Hey, buddy," Evan had whispered. "You ready for our adventure?" Miles's face had lit up like Christmas morning. "The beach? We're really going?" "We're really going. Just you and me, kiddo. Pack your trucks." Now, 3 hours later, Evan stood in the parking lot of Crescent Bay Beach, squinting against the late May sunshine and wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake. The lot was packed. Absolutely packed. Cars circled like sharks, hunting for spaces that didn't exist. Families poured out of minivans loaded with enough equipment to colonize a small island. The air smelled like sunscreen and salt and the particular chaos that comes with combining children, sand, and open water. "Dad, look how many people there are!" Miles pressed his face against the window, his breath fogging the glass. "It's like the whole world came to the beach." "Yeah, I'm seeing that." Evan gripped the steering wheel, calculating. They could turn around, head somewhere quieter, maybe that state park with the hiking trails. But Miles had been talking about the ocean for 2 weeks straight, ever since Evan had promised him this trip. The ocean with the big waves. The ocean where they could build the best sandcastle in the entire universe. Evan was many things. Overworked, underpaid, perpetually exhausted. But he was not the kind of father who broke promises to his kid. "We're doing this," he said, more to himself than to Miles. "We're finding a spot, and we're building that castle, and we're having the best day ever. Deal? Deal!" Miles was already unbuckling his seatbelt, his small hands fumbling with the plastic clip. 20 minutes and one minor miracle later, they'd claimed a patch of sand that was technically close enough to the water to count as premium real estate, even if it meant being surrounded on all sides by other families. Evan spread out their blanket, a faded Red Sox throw that had seen better days, and started the complex process of applying sunscreen to a squirming 6-year-old. "Dad, you're getting it in my eyes." "I'm not even near your eyes, Miles. Hold still." "It smells weird." "It smells like not getting sunburned. Arms up." Miles complied, barely, his attention already caught by a nearby family with a dog, an actual dog on the beach, and Evan could see the question forming before it even left his son's mouth. "Don't even think about it," Evan said, squeezing a line of SPF 50 down Miles's back. "We've had this conversation. When we get a bigger place, when I'm working fewer hours, when I'm grown up and moved out." Miles finished dramatically, flopping onto the blanket like his life was a Shakespearean tragedy. "That's what you always say." Evan's chest tightened. It was the truth, even if it hurt to admit. The apartment was barely big enough for the two of them. His schedule was a nightmare of early meetings and late-night deadlines. The child support he paid to Miles's mother, combined with the cost of living in Boston, meant that luxuries like pets and bigger apartments and financial security lived in some distant future he could barely imagine. But today wasn't about what they didn't have. Today was about being here, together, making memories that didn't involve Evan's laptop or the constant pressure of work. "Tell you what," Evan said, capping the sunscreen bottle. "Let's build a sandcastle so awesome that people come from miles around just to take pictures of it. We'll make it the most famous sandcastle in Massachusetts. Deal? Miles considered this, his small face serious. Then he grinned, gap-toothed and perfect. Deal. But it needs a moat, and towers, and a bridge that actually works. Obviously, I wouldn't have it any other way. They gathered their supplies, plastic buckets in primary colors, shovels with broken handles, a few random kitchen utensils Evan had grabbed from the drawer because he couldn't find the actual beach toys, and headed down to the wet sand where the castle building would be optimal. Miles chattered the entire way, narrating his vision for their architectural masterpiece, and Evan found himself relaxing for the first time in weeks. This was good. This was what mattered. Just him and his kid, building something together, even if it was destined to be washed away by the tide. The morning dissolved into a blur of sand and salt water and Miles's infectious laughter. They dug the moat first, an ambitious circle that kept filling with water and collapsing, requiring constant maintenance. Then came the walls, packed tight, smoothed with careful hands. Miles insisted on decorating with shells and sea glass, arranging them in patterns that made sense only to him. This one's the King's Tower, he explained, patting a lopsided cylinder. And this one's where the princess lives. But she's not a regular princess. She's an astronaut princess. Naturally, Evan said, biting back a smile. Every castle needs one of those. And this is the garage for the royal helicopters. Miles, they didn't have helicopters in medieval times. Miles looked at him with profound pity. Dad, it's a magic castle. They can have whatever they want. Fair enough. Evan had no counterargument for magic. He sat back on his heels, surveying their work. It wasn't half bad, actually. Sure, it wouldn't win any architectural awards, but it had character. It had heart. It had a garage for royal helicopters, which was more than most castles could claim. The sun climbed higher, turning the ocean into a sheet of diamonds. Around them, the beach filled with the soundtrack of summer, children shrieking, waves crashing, radios playing competing songs, seagulls arguing over abandoned French fries. Evan felt something unfamiliar loosen in his chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the simple pleasure of not being needed by anyone except the small person beside him, who was now trying to convince a hermit crab to be the castle's official guard. I'm going to get us some water, Evan said, standing and brushing sand off his knees. You good here for a minute? Yep, me and Herbert are busy. Miles held up the hermit crab, who looked deeply unenthusiastic about his new career in castle security. Don't let Herbert pinch you. I won't. We're friends now. Evan grabbed their cooler and headed back toward the blanket, weaving through the obstacle course of beach umbrellas and towels and tiny humans running in random directions. He was halfway there when he saw her. Vivian Hart, his boss. Standing about 30 feet away, wearing a white cover-up over a dark swimsuit, her hair down instead of pulled back in its usual severe bun, laughing at something her companion was saying. Evan's entire body went rigid. No, 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 no. This was not happening. This was his day, his one precious day with Miles, and Vivian Hart, the woman who made senior partners cry in meetings, who had a reputation for perfection that bordered on pathological, who represented everything stressful and demanding about his work life, could not be here. The universe could not be this cruel. He changed direction immediately, trying to make himself smaller, invisible, just another dad in board shorts and a faded t-shirt. If he could just get back to Miles without being seen, they could pack up, relocate to literally anywhere else on this beach. Hell, they could relocate to a different beach entirely. Rhode Island had beaches. New Hampshire had beaches. They had options. But the beach was crowded, and Evan was carrying a bright blue cooler, and when you're trying not to be noticed, that's exactly when the universe decides to make you the main character. A gust of wind came off the ocean, strong and sudden. Evan felt it catch his shirt, cool against his sun-warmed skin. He saw it hit the cluster of umbrellas to his left, sending them tilting. And then he saw what it did to Vivian Hart's beach wrap. The white fabric caught the wind like a sail. For a split second, maybe less, maybe just a fraction of a moment that Evan's horrified brain stretched into an eternity, the wrap lifted, exposing far more of Vivian Hart than any employee should ever, under any circumstances, witness. Evan's eyes went wide. He tried to look away. He really did. But the human brain is not designed to process "do not look." in high-pressure situations. By the time he managed to redirect his gaze to literally anywhere else, the damage was done. And Vivian was looking directly at him. Their eyes met across the sand. Her hand had caught the wayward fabric, pulling it back into place, but her expression, oh God, her expression shifted through surprise to recognition to something that Evan could only classify as cold fury. She knew. She knew he'd seen. Evan's mouth went dry. His mind raced through approximately 10,000 potential responses, from "I'm so sorry" to "I wasn't looking" to "I'm going to relocate to another country immediately," none of which seemed adequate for the magnitude of this disaster. This was it. This was how his career ended, not because of poor performance or office politics or budget cuts, but because of one freakish moment of wind and unfortunate timing on a crowded beach. He should leave. He should grab Miles and evacuate immediately, spend the weekend drafting his resignation letter, start researching architecture firms in other cities. Boston was overrated anyway. Miles would adjust. But even as his fight or flight instinct screamed at him to flee, Evan found himself rooted to the spot, because Vivian was saying something to her companion, a woman who looked enough like her to be a sister, and then she was walking toward him. Actually walking toward him, across the sand, with purpose. Every instinct Evan possessed told him to run, but his legs had apparently decided that paralysis was the better option. The cooler dangled from his hand, forgotten. Somewhere behind him, Miles was probably still communing with Herbert the hermit crab, blissfully unaware that his father's professional life was imploding in real time. Vivian stopped about 3 feet away. Up close, without the armor of her power suits and perfect makeup, she looked different. Younger, maybe? More human. But her eyes still held that sharp intelligence that had made Evan's first presentation to her feel like a doctoral defense. "Mr. Hale?" Her voice was measured, controlled. The same voice she used in the office, the one that could make interesting approach sound like both a compliment and a death sentence. "Ms. Hart, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." The words tumbled out, clumsy and inadequate. "It was the wind, and I was just walking back to my son, and I swear I looked away as soon as—" She held up one hand, stopping him mid-ramble. "It was an accident." Evan blinked. "What?" "The wind. It was an accident. These things happen at beaches." She said it matter-of-factly, like she was discussing weather patterns instead of the most mortifying moment of Evan's professional life. "I'm choosing to treat it as such." "You are? Unless you'd prefer I make it an issue?" One eyebrow arched, and there was the Vivian Hart he knew from the office, the one who could slice through excuses like a hot knife through butter. No, definitely not." Evan clutched the cooler like a life preserver. "I really am sorry. This was supposed to be a day with my son, and I had no idea you'd be here, and—" "You have a son?" The question caught him off guard. In the 3 years he'd worked at Hart and Associates, Vivian had never asked him a single personal question. She knew his work product, his design aesthetic, his tendency to stay late when deadlines loomed. But his actual life? That had never seemed relevant to her. "Yeah, Miles, he's 6. Evan gestured vaguely toward their blanket and the sandcastle construction site beyond it. Building sandcastles, living the dream. Something flickered across Vivian's face, too quick for Evan to identify. "How old did you say?" 6, first grade. "Well, he will be in the fall. Right now he's in kindergarten, but they're doing this summer program," and Evan stopped himself, realizing he was rambling again. "Sorry, you probably don't care about my kid's school schedule." "I didn't say that." Vivian's gaze drifted past him, toward the castle building operation. "Which one is he?" Evan turned, following her line of sight. Miles had abandoned Herbert and was now engaged in what appeared to be an engineering discussion with a girl about his age, both of them gesturing at the moat with the seriousness of actual architects debating load-bearing structures. "The one in the blue swim trunks with the shark on them," Evan said, unable to keep the pride out of his voice. "He's very passionate about moat drainage systems, apparently." "He looks like you." Poor kid. The words came out automatically, a self-deprecating reflex Evan had developed over years of being the tired-looking guy in the office. But Vivian didn't smile. Instead, she looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You're here alone? Just the two of you?" The question landed heavier than it should have. Evan felt the familiar weight of it, all the explanations he'd given over the years to teachers and other parents and people who asked just the two of you questions with varying degrees of judgment or pity. "Yeah, his mom and I split when he was 2. We have joint custody, but she moved to New York last year for work, so now it's weekends and holidays and complicated logistics." He shrugged, trying to make it sound casual, like his life wasn't a constant juggling act of parenting and work, and never quite enough hours in the day. "Today's my Saturday with him. We try to make it count." Vivian was quiet for a moment, her gaze still on Miles. When she spoke, her voice had lost some of its professional edge. "That's why you're always the first one in the office." It wasn't a question, but Evan answered anyway. 5:30 a.m. meetings work better than staying late. Daycare closes at 6, and the aftercare program is... He caught himself again. "Sorry, you definitely don't need to hear about my childcare logistics." "You apologize a lot." Vivian turned back to him, and there was something almost curious in her expression now. "Even when you haven't done anything wrong." "Occupational hazard?" Evan attempted a smile. "Working for a perfectionist makes you very aware of all the ways you might be screwing up." "Is that what you think I am? A perfectionist?" "I think you have standards, which is good. It's why the firm has the reputation it does." Evan was treading carefully now, very aware that he was having this conversation in board shorts while still recovering from the most awkward moment of his adult life. "I respect that, even when it's terrifying." "I make you afraid." Again, not a question. "You make everyone afraid, Ms. Hart. It's kind of your thing." For the first time since she'd walked over, Vivian's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. "Vivian, we're not in the office, Mr. Hale. I think we can dispense with formalities, given the circumstances." "Evan," he said automatically. Then, because his brain had apparently decided to abandon all sense of self-preservation, he added, "And I really am sorry. About before. The wind thing. I wasn't trying to—" "I know." She cut him off, but gently. "I believe you. And I'm choosing to be gracious about it, which is not something I'm particularly known for, so perhaps don't test my generosity by continuing to apologize." "Right, sorry. I mean—" Evan stopped himself, seeing her eyebrow arch again. "Not sorry. Acknowledged and moving on." "Better." Vivian glanced back toward where her companion waited, then seemed to make a decision. "I should let you get back to your son. Sandcastles don't build themselves. Actually, I think Miles might have strong opinions about whether I'm even necessary at this point. He's got some pretty specific architectural vision. Must run in the family." It was such a normal thing to say, such a human moment of small talk, that it took Evan a second to remember he was talking to Vivian Hart, who did not do small talk, who barely did conversation beyond work-related necessities. "Yeah, I guess so," he managed. "Thanks for being cool about this, the whole situation." "Beach accidents happen," Vivian said it firmly, like she was closing a case file. "Enjoy your day with your son, Evan. I'll see you Monday." She turned to leave, and Evan felt the tension drain from his shoulders. Disaster averted, career intact. He could breathe again. But then a small voice rang out across the sand, bright and carrying and utterly oblivious to social conventions. "Dad! Dad! I need your help! The bridge is collapsing!" Evan turned to see Miles waving frantically, his new friend having apparently moved on to other beach activities. And because the universe had a sense of humor, Vivian stopped walking. "The bridge?" she asked. "For the sandcastle," Evan explained. "He wanted a working drawbridge. I tried to explain that we don't exactly have the materials for that, but Miles is an optimist." "An optimist or an engineer?" "With him, both." Vivian looked at Miles, then at Evan, then back at Miles again. Something shifted in her expression, some calculation happening behind those sharp eyes. When she spoke, her voice held a note of something that might have been amusement. "I studied structural engineering before I switched to architecture," she said. "Bridges were my specialty." Evan stared at her. "You're kidding." "I don't kid about engineering, Evan." And then, completely unprecedented, Vivian Hart started walking toward his son's sandcastle. Let's see what we're working with. Evan stood frozen for approximately 3 seconds, trying to process what was happening. His boss, his terrifying, brilliant, impossible-to-read boss, was about to consult on a 6-year-old sandcastle bridge. This day had officially left the realm of reality and entered some alternate dimension where normal rules didn't apply. He grabbed the cooler and followed, because what else could he do? Miles looked up as they approached, his face smudged with sand and pure determination. "Dad, the bridge keeps, He stopped, seeing Vivian. "Who's that?" "This is Ms. Hart. She works with Daddy." "Vivian," she corrected, and Evan nearly dropped the cooler again. "And your father tells me you're having bridge troubles." Miles's eyes went wide. "Do you know about bridges?" "I know quite a bit about bridges, actually." Vivian crouched down, apparently unconcerned about getting sand on her cover-up. "May I see what you're working with?" What followed was one of the strangest 10 minutes of Evan's life. He watched, slightly stunned, as Vivian Hart, the woman who had made a senior partner cry last month over a misplaced comma in a contract, discussed bridge engineering with his 6-year-old son with complete seriousness. She explained weight distribution using shells as examples. She demonstrated how to create support structures with carefully placed sticks. She listened to Miles's ideas with the same attention she gave to million-dollar client presentations. And Miles, who had never met a stranger he couldn't befriend, absorbed it all like a sponge. "So the water can go under, but the bridge doesn't fall?" he asked, watching as Vivian shaped wet sand into an arch. "Exactly. The arch distributes the weight down and out, instead of just down. Romans used this technique 2,000 years ago." "Cool. Did they have sandcastles?" "I'm sure they had some version of them. People have been building things out of sand for a very long time. My dad builds things too. Real buildings. Big ones." Vivian glanced up at Evan, who was trying to figure out where to put himself in this surreal tableau. "Does he?" "Uh-huh. But he's always really tired because he has to work a lot, and sometimes he falls asleep on the couch with his computer still on." Miles said this with the casual honesty of someone too young to understand discretion. "But today he promised we'd build the best sandcastle in Massachusetts, so he had to wake up extra early to make sure we got here on time." Evan felt heat crawl up his neck that had nothing to do with the sun. "Miles? And he makes really good pancakes on Saturday mornings. Except when we're running late and then we have to eat cereal in the car. But the car cereal is okay because Dad lets me pick the music." "Miles, I don't think Vivian needs to hear about our breakfast habits." But Vivian was looking at him with that unreadable expression again. "You make pancakes?" "Sometimes. When we have time." Evan shifted uncomfortably. "It's not a big deal." "He makes them in shapes," Miles continued, oblivious to his father's mortification. "Last week he made one that looked like a dinosaur. It was supposed to be a T-Rex, but it came out more like a chicken." "A very large chicken," Evan corrected, "practically dinosaur-sized." Vivian's mouth twitched. "I see. And Dad always makes sure I have lunch money and clean clothes, and he helps with my homework even when he's really tired from work. And he comes to all my school things, even the boring ones." Miles was on a roll now, cataloging his father's virtues with the earnest pride of a 6-year-old who thought his dad hung the moon. "And when I had bad dreams about the dark, he got me a nightlight that looks like stars." "Miles," Evan said quietly, his throat suddenly tight. "Buddy, I think we should—" "Your father sounds like a very dedicated parent," Vivian said, and there was something in her voice that Evan couldn't identify, something softer than he'd ever heard from her. "He's the best dad ever," Miles declared with absolute certainty, "even if he can't get me a dog." And just like that, the moment shifted back to normal, or as normal as anything could be when your boss was kneeling in the sand helping your kid build a bridge for a make-believe castle. "The dog thing is complicated," Evan explained, even though he wasn't sure why he felt the need to justify it. "Our apartment has a no-pets policy, and—" "You don't need to explain," Vivian said quietly. She turned back to Miles, examining the bridge they'd constructed. "I think this will hold. Want to test it?" Miles nodded eagerly. Together they carefully placed shells across the bridge, each one a tiny test of their engineering. The structure held. Miles cheered like they'd just won the Nobel Prize in architecture. It worked! Did you see, Dad? It worked! I saw, buddy. That's really impressive. Evan caught Vivian's eye over Miles's head, mouthing a silent thank you. She nodded, just barely, then stood up and brushed sand from her knees. Well, I should get back to my sister. She's probably wondering if I've been carried out to sea. Wait, Miles said, looking up at her with those big eyes that could convince anyone of anything. Don't you want to see the rest of the castle? We have a garage for royal helicopters. Vivian hesitated. Evan could see her calculating, weighing whatever social obligation she felt against the clear boundary of their professional relationship. This was where she'd make her exit, polite and definitive. This was where things would go back to normal. But then she said, Royal helicopters? That does sound impressive. Miles grabbed her hand, just reached out and took it like it was the most natural thing in the world, and led her on a tour of their sandy kingdom. Evan followed at a distance, still processing the fundamental wrongness of this situation. His boss, his terrifying boss, who he'd accidentally seen half naked and who should be firing him or, at minimum, treating him with icy professional distance, was now listening to his son explain the difference between a regular tower and an astronaut princess tower. See, regular princesses just wait around to be rescued, Miles was saying. But astronaut princesses can rescue themselves because they know about science and spaceships. That's a very modern interpretation, Vivian said seriously. I approve. My mom says that princesses are old-fashioned and I shouldn't play with that stuff, but Dad says stories can be whatever you want them to be, as long as you're having fun. Evan winced. He could see Vivian processing this, adding it to whatever mental file she was building about his personal life. Single dad. Joint custody, philosophical differences with the ex about gender roles and childhood play. But Vivian just nodded. Your father is right. The best stories are the ones we create ourselves. They reached the blanket and Evan gestured awkwardly at the faded Red Sox throw. It's not much, but you're welcome to sit for a minute if you want. He expected her to decline, to invent some excuse about her sister waiting, about needing to get back, about having spent enough time on this strange detour into his personal life. Instead, Vivian glanced back toward where her sister sat reading under an umbrella, then settled onto the edge of the blanket with surprising grace. Just for a minute, she said. Miles immediately plopped down beside her, chattering about his plans to add a flag to the highest tower. Evan lowered himself to the blanket carefully, maintaining as much distance as possible while still technically being part of the same social group. This was fine. This was just his boss, sitting on his blanket, talking to his kid, acting like a normal human being instead of the professional force of nature he'd worked for 3 years. Totally fine, completely normal, nothing to be anxious about at all. Would you like some water? The words came out before Evan could stop them. Or, I think we have juice boxes. They're the organic kind. Miles insists on the organic kind because his friend Tyler told him regular juice boxes have chemicals, which I tried to explain is technically true of all matter, but he was rambling. Again, water's probably better, more adult. Vivian's lips quirked. Water would be lovely. Thank you. Evan retrieved 2 bottles from the cooler, handing one to Vivian and keeping one for himself. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and he tried very hard not to think about the fact that he was touching his boss's hand, that he'd seen significantly more than her hand earlier, that this entire day had become some kind of fever dream from which he couldn't wake up. So Miles, Vivian said, twisting the cap off her water bottle, what grade are you in? Kindergarten, but I'm going to be in 1st grade in September. Mrs. Patterson says I'm ready. Miles swung his legs, kicking up small sprays of sand. I can read chapter books and everything. Chapter books? That's quite advanced. Dad reads to me every night, even when he's super tired. We're reading this one about a boy who finds a magic door and, oh, Dad, can we tell her about the door? I don't think... But Miles was already off, narrating the plot of their current bedtime book with the kind of detailed enthusiasm that only 6-year-olds could muster. Evan watched Vivian's face as she listened, trying to gauge her reaction. Was she bored? Annoyed? Counting down the seconds until she could politely excuse herself? But she seemed genuinely engaged, asking questions, making comments that showed she was actually paying attention. It was disorienting seeing this side of her. In the office, Vivian Hart was all business. Sharp suits and sharper words, making decisions with the kind of confidence that came from knowing you were almost always right. She didn't waste time on small talk or personal connections. She certainly didn't sit on faded blankets at crowded beaches, listening to first graders explain fantasy novels. "That sounds like quite an adventure," Vivian said when Miles finally paused for breath. "You'll have to let me know how it ends." Miles beamed. "You could read it too. It's at the library. Dad takes me every other Tuesday." "Does he?" Vivian glanced at Evan, and there was something in her eyes that made him shift uncomfortably. "It's free entertainment," Evan said with a shrug, "and it gets him excited about reading. Win-win. Dad says libraries are the best invention ever because knowledge should be free and accessible to everyone." Miles repeated this like it was gospel truth. "And also because we can't afford to buy all the books I want to read." "Miles," Evan felt his face flush. "I don't think—" "It's true, though." Miles looked confused by his father's embarrassment. "You said we have to be smart about money because rent is expensive, and I need new shoes because I'm growing, and that's all true, buddy, but maybe we don't need to share every detail of our finances with—" Evan stopped, realizing he was about to say "with my boss" in front of his son, which would require explanations he didn't want to get into. But Vivian saved him. "Your father is teaching you to be responsible. That's admirable." "What's admirable mean?" "It means worthy of respect and approval." Miles considered this, then nodded seriously. "Dad is admirable. He's also good at fixing things when they break, except for the toaster. The toaster is dead, and we have to use the oven now." Evan buried his face in his hands. "Why are you like this?" "Like what?" "Like a tiny investigative journalist determined to expose every detail of our lives." Miles giggled. "I'm not a journalist. I'm a kindergartner." "Could have fooled me," Evan muttered, but he was smiling despite himself. Vivian was smiling too, he realized. Actually smiling, not the tight professional expression she wore in meetings, but something genuine that reached her eyes and changed her whole face. It made her look younger, more approachable, like someone he might actually want to know outside the context of work and deadlines and the constant pressure to be perfect. "You have a wonderful son," she said quietly, and the sincerity in her voice caught Evan off guard. "Thanks. He's pretty much the best thing I've ever made." "Better than buildings?" "Way better than buildings. Buildings don't give you hugs or tell you terrible knock-knock jokes or make you remember why any of it matters." Something flickered across Vivian's face, quickly, there and gone, but Evan saw it. Recognition, maybe. Or longing. Or sadness. He couldn't tell. Before he could analyze it further, a voice called out from down the beach. "Viv, you planning to come back, or should I just assume you've been adopted by this family?" Vivian turned, and Evan followed her gaze to see a woman approaching, the same one she'd been with earlier. Definitely a sister, the resemblance was clear now that Evan could see her up close. Same sharp cheekbones, same elegant bearing, but where Vivian held herself with controlled precision, her sister moved with easy confidence. "This is my sister Rachel," Vivian said, standing up. "Rachel, this is Evan Hale. He works at the firm." Rachel's eyebrows shot up. "Really? You're socializing with employees? Should I check the sky for falling apocalypse signs?" "We ran into each other. It's a small world." "Apparently." Rachel's gaze shifted to Evan, assessing him with the kind of shrewd attention that seemed to run in their family. "So you work for my sister. My condolences." "Rachel," Vivian said warningly. "What?" "I'm being sympathetic. I know what you're like in work mode." Rachel grinned at Evan. "Does she make you cry? She made me cry once when I asked her to review my resume." "It was a terrible resume," Vivian said dryly. "Someone had to tell you that listing enthusiasm as a skill was not in fact a selling point." "See? Brutal." But Rachel said it with affection. She looked down at Miles, who was watching this exchange with interest. "And who's this?" "I'm Miles. That's my sandcastle over there. It has a working bridge." "Does it now? I'm impressed." Vivian helped with the engineering. She's really smart. Rachel's expression shifted into something that looked distinctly like surprise. "Vivian helped build a sandcastle?" "The bridge," Vivian corrected. "Specifically, the bridge. And it was more consultation than actual construction." Still, you. A sandcastle. I feel like I should take a picture for Mom's memorial wall. The air changed. Evan felt it, that subtle shift that happens when someone mentions something heavy without meaning to. Vivian's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly, and Rachel's smile dimmed just slightly. "We should head back," Vivian said, her voice returning to that controlled tone Evan recognized from the office. Professional, distant. "I've monopolized enough of your time, Evan. Enjoy the rest of your day with your son." "Thanks. And thanks for being cool about everything." He meant the bridge, the conversation, the whole bizarre situation, but especially the earlier incident that they'd both agreed to never speak of again. Vivian met his eyes, and for a moment he saw something there. An understanding, maybe, or just the acknowledgement of two people who'd accidentally stepped outside their normal roles and found something unexpected. "See you Monday," she said. "Monday," Evan confirmed. He watched as the sisters walked away, Rachel immediately leaning in to say something that made Vivian's shoulders tense. They were too far away for him to hear the conversation, but he could imagine it well enough. Questions about why Vivian had spent 20 minutes with one of her employees, teasing about the sandcastle. Maybe something about, "Dad? Was that really your boss?" Evan looked down at Miles, who was tracking the sisters' departure with curious eyes. "Yeah, buddy, that was really my boss. She was nice." "She was, actually." "Does she always help build sandcastles?" "I seriously doubt it. I think you might be the first person she's done that for." Miles processed this, then grinned. "Cool. We're special." "Yeah," Evan said, looking at his son, this small, perfect person who made everything else make sense. "We definitely are." They spent the rest of the afternoon finishing their castle, adding elaborate details that would be claimed by the tide before nightfall. Miles found more shells to decorate with. Evan dug a secondary moat. They built walls and towers and an entire royal helicopter pad that made architectural sense to absolutely no one except them. The sun tracked across the sky, other families packed up and left, new ones arrived. The beach cycled through its eternal summer rhythm. And somewhere in the back of Evan's mind, he kept replaying the strange, surreal encounter with Vivian Hart. The way she'd looked at Miles was something almost wistful. The way she'd sat on their blanket like she belonged there. The way she'd smiled, really smiled, over a sandcastle bridge. Monday was going to be weird. But for now, Evan pushed those thoughts aside and focused on his son, on this moment, on building something that would last just long enough to matter. The tide was coming in when they finally packed up, claiming their castle inch by inch. Miles watched with solemn acceptance as the ocean reclaimed their work. "It was a good castle," he said philosophically. "The best," Evan agreed. "We can build another one next time?" "Absolutely. Every time." They trudged back to the car, sandy and tired and sunburned in the best possible way. Miles fell asleep before they even hit the highway, his head tilted against the window, one hand still clutching a shell he'd insisted on keeping. Evan drove home in the golden hour light, the radio playing softly, his mind wandering over the day's events. He thought about Vivian crouching in the sand, explaining bridge engineering to a 6-year-old. He thought about her smile, so different from the one she wore in the office. He thought about the sadness that had crossed her face when Rachel mentioned their mother. There was more to Vivian Hart than he'd realized. Layers beneath the perfectionist boss, the demanding taskmaster, the woman who made partners nervous. She was human, complex, capable of kindness and patience, and sitting on a stranger's blanket just because a little boy asked her to. Monday was definitely going to be weird, but maybe, and this was a dangerous thought, the kind that led to complications, maybe it would be a good kind of weird. Maybe. Evan pulled into his apartment complex as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. He carried Miles inside, tucked him into bed still wearing his sandy clothes because sometimes you had to choose your battles. He stood in the doorway of his son's room, watching him sleep, and felt the familiar weight of love and responsibility and the bone-deep knowledge that he'd do anything for this kid. His phone buzzed. A work email, probably, or a reminder about Monday's meeting. Evan ignored it. Tonight wasn't about work. Tonight was about Miles, about sandcastles, about the unexpected moments that make life interesting. Tomorrow he'd worry about facing Vivian Hart in the office. Tomorrow he'd process what it meant that she'd spent part of her beach day with them. Tomorrow he'd figure out how to navigate the strange new dimension their professional relationship had entered. But tonight? Tonight he'd just be grateful that the wind had blown in exactly the right direction to show him that even the most intimidating people could surprise you. That kindness came in unexpected packages. That sometimes the universe threw you curveballs that looked like disasters but turned into something else entirely. Evan showered the sand off, made himself a sandwich he barely tasted, and fell into bed exhausted but content. His last thought before sleep claimed him was of Vivian's smile, genuine and warm, as she helped Miles test their bridge. Yeah, Monday was going to be very interesting indeed. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of taxes and the same sense of impending doom. Evan stood in front of his closet at 5:15 a.m., staring at his work shirts like they held the answers to questions he wasn't ready to ask. What did you wear when you had to face your boss after accidentally seeing her half naked at the beach? Was there a dress code for that particular circle of professional hell? He settled on navy blue. Safe. Professional. The kind of shirt that said, "I'm a serious architect who definitely did not spend his entire Sunday night replaying an awkward beach encounter in his head." Miles shuffled into the kitchen as Evan was making coffee, dragging his favorite stuffed dinosaur by one arm. "Is it a work day?" "It's a work day, buddy. Do you have to see that lady, the one from the beach?" Evan's hand froze on the coffee pot. "Yeah, I have to see that lady." "Are you nervous?" Out of the mouths of 6-year-olds. Evan looked at his son, who was watching him with those two perceptive eyes that missed absolutely nothing. "Maybe a little," he admitted. "Why? She was nice. She helped with our bridge." "She was nice, but she's also my boss, and things are complicated." "Complicated how? How did you explain professional boundaries to a kindergartner? How did you articulate the delicate balance of power dynamics and workplace hierarchies, and the fact that your boss seeing you in dad mode at the beach was fundamentally different from her seeing you in employee mode at the office?" "Just grown-up stuff," Evan said, which was the universal parent cop-out. "Nothing for you to worry about." Miles accepted this with a shrug and went back to his cereal. Evan envied him that simplicity, that ability to take things at face value without overthinking every possible implication. The commute into downtown Boston felt longer than usual, even though traffic was actually lighter than normal. Evan's mind kept wandering to Saturday, to the look on Vivian's face when Miles had grabbed her hand, to the way she'd smiled over the working bridge, to that flash of something painful when Rachel mentioned their mother. He parked in his usual spot in the garage beneath the office building, a sleek glass tower in the financial district that housed Hart and Associates on floors 12 through 15. The firm occupied prime real estate, which made sense given that Vivian Hart had built her reputation on designing spaces that commanded attention and respect. Evan had been honored when they'd hired him 3 years ago, fresh off a project that had won some minor industry recognition. Working for Hart and Associates meant working on buildings that mattered, with clients who had the budgets to do things right. It also meant working for a woman whose standards bordered on impossible and whose approval felt as rare and valuable as platinum. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt like ascending to judgment. Evan's reflection stared back at him from the polished steel doors. Tired eyes, coffee in hand, the slight tension in his shoulders that had become permanent somewhere around his second year at the firm. The reception area was empty this early. Evan had his choice of the best coffee pods in the break room, the quietest desk space, the precious hours before phones started ringing and meetings began. This was his time, the window he'd carved out of his impossible schedule, when he could actually think without interruption. He settled at his desk, booted up his computer, and pulled up the Riverside Project files. A mixed-use development in Cambridge, residential and commercial, the kind of project that required balancing aesthetics with practicality, client vision with building codes, budget constraints with architectural ambition. Evan had been working on the facade designs for weeks, tweaking and refining until his eyes crossed. The office filled gradually around him. Junior architects arrived, associates, the admin staff. Coffee machines hummed, conversations started. The workday began its familiar rhythm, and Evan let himself relax slightly. Maybe Saturday had been an anomaly. Maybe Vivian would treat it like what it was. A random encounter, briefly acknowledged, easily forgotten. Maybe they'd never have to discuss it at all. That hope died at exactly 8:47 a.m. when Vivian's voice cut through the office ambient noise. "Evan, my office. 5 minutes." He looked up to find her standing near the conference room, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her hair pulled back in that severe bun, every inch the formidable professional he'd worked for 3 years. She met his eyes for exactly 2 seconds, her expression unreadable, then walked toward her corner office without waiting for a response. Around him, Evan felt the other architects trying very hard to look like they weren't paying attention. Being summoned to Vivian's office was never good. It usually meant something had gone wrong, or was about to go wrong, or she'd found 17 ways you'd failed to meet her expectations in a project you thought was perfect. Evan saved his work, grabbed his portfolio, always bring documentation to meetings with Vivian, and headed for the corner office with the sick feeling of a man walking to his own execution. 5 minutes turned into 7 because Evan spent 2 of them standing outside her door trying to calm his breathing. This was fine. This was just work. Saturday hadn't happened. They were just going to discuss projects and timelines and absolutely nothing personal whatsoever. He knocked. "Come in." Vivian sat behind her desk, backlit by the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of Boston Harbor. Her office was exactly what you'd expect from someone of her caliber. Minimalist design, expensive furniture, architectural models displayed like art pieces. Everything in its place. Everything perfect. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Close the door." Evan's stomach dropped. Nothing good ever started with "close the door." He did as instructed and sat down, portfolio in his lap like a shield. Vivian studied him for a moment that stretched into uncomfortable territory. Then she said, "We need to talk about Saturday." "Ms. Hart, Vivian, we established that on the beach." She leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. "And before you launch into another round of apologies, let me be very clear. I'm not interested in rehashing the incident itself. What's done is done. The wind was unfortunate. You looked away. I'm choosing to treat it as a non-issue." "Okay," Evan said slowly. "Then what I want to discuss is what happened after." Vivian's gaze was steady, assessing. "Your son." Evan's protective instincts kicked in immediately. "Miles didn't do anything wrong." "I didn't say he did. In fact, quite the opposite." Something shifted in Vivian's expression, softening slightly. "He was charming, intelligent, refreshingly honest about your life in ways that were illuminating." "Illuminating," Evan repeated, not sure if that was good or bad. "In 3 years, Evan, I've known you as a reliable architect who meets deadlines and produces quality work. What I didn't know, what you've apparently gone to great lengths to keep private, is that you're a single parent managing an incredibly complex situation while maintaining your professional obligations." Evan shifted in his seat. "I didn't think my personal life was relevant to my work." "It's not, except that it explains certain patterns I've noticed." Vivian pulled up something on her computer, turning the screen so Evan could see. It was his time card. "You arrive before anyone else. You leave precisely at 5:30, never later, even when projects are in critical phases. You never attend evening client dinners or after-hours networking events. You've turned down 3 opportunities to lead projects that would require travel." "I have responsibilities." "I know. That's my point." Vivian closed the file. "I've been viewing your boundaries as limitations. Lack of ambition, perhaps, or unwillingness to fully commit to the firm. What Saturday showed me is that I've been fundamentally wrong about your priorities." Evan wasn't sure where this was going, but it didn't feel like the reprimand he'd been expecting. "Okay?" "You're not avoiding commitment, Evan. You're managing an impossible balance, and from what I saw on Saturday, you're doing it remarkably well." The compliment caught him off guard. Vivian Hart did not give compliments lightly. "When she praised your work, you framed it. When she praised your character, you questioned whether you were having a stroke." "I do my best," he said carefully. "Your son told me you read to him every night, that you take him to the library every other Tuesday. That you make pancakes in dinosaur shapes and ensure he has clean clothes and help with homework despite being exhausted from work. Vivian's voice was matter of fact, but something in her eyes had changed. That's not just doing your best. That's dedication that goes beyond professional obligation. He's my kid. That's just being a parent. Is it? Vivian stood up, moving to the window. Her silhouette against the bright morning light made it hard to read her expression. Many people compartmentalize. They outsource the difficult parts of parenting, prioritize their careers, tell themselves that providing financially is enough. You're clearly not doing that. Evan had no idea what to say. This conversation had veered into territory he'd never expected to navigate with his boss, in her office, on a Monday morning. I had a father who did that, Vivian said quietly, still facing the window. Compartmentalized. Prioritized work. My mother died when I was 8. Cancer. Sudden, devastating, the kind of loss that reorganizes your entire world. She paused. My father threw himself into his work. Built his company into something impressive. Made sure Rachel and I had the best schools, the best opportunities, everything money could buy. But not his time, Evan said softly. No, not his time. Vivian turned back to face him, and in the morning light, she looked younger and older all at once. We had nannies, very competent nannies, and my father attended the important events, graduations, awards ceremonies, the milestone moments. But the everyday things, reading at night, help with homework, pancakes in the morning, those weren't his priority. The office felt very quiet. Outside, Evan could hear phones ringing, conversations happening, the normal sounds of a workday. But in here, it felt like they'd stepped outside of time into some honest space where the usual rules didn't apply. I'm sorry, Evan said. That must have been hard. It shaped who I became. Driven, focused, determined to build something that would make him proud. Vivian's smile was slight and sad. I've spent my adult life proving I could be just as successful as he was, more successful even, and I've used the same methods, prioritizing work above all else, maintaining distance, keeping people at arm's length. You're very good at what you do. I am, but watching you with your son on Saturday made me question what I've sacrificed to get here. She moved back to her desk, but didn't sit. Instead, she leaned against it, a posture more casual than Evan had ever seen from her in this context. Miles adores you. That was obvious. And not because you buy him things or give him privileges, but because you show up, you're present, you read the books, and build the sandcastles and make the pancakes, even when you're exhausted. It's not always perfect, Evan admitted. Sometimes the pancakes are terrible. Sometimes I fall asleep during story time. Sometimes I lose my patience over small things because I'm running on 4 hours of sleep and too much coffee. But you're there. That's what matters. Vivian looked at him directly. And I've made your job harder by not acknowledging that your presence in your son's life requires accommodations in your professional life. Evan blinked. I'm not sure I follow. The 5:30 departure time, the inability to travel, the morning-only meeting preference. Vivian counted these off. You've structured your work life around your parenting obligations, and I've been treating that structure as inflexibility rather than what it actually is, responsible planning. I've never missed a deadline, Evan said, defensive despite himself. I know, that's exactly my point. You meet every professional obligation while also being a full-time parent. That requires extraordinary time management and commitment. Vivian crossed her arms. So here's what I'm proposing. I want to make Hart and Associates more accommodating for people in your situation. My situation? Parents. Single parents specifically, but really any employee who's balancing significant caregiving responsibilities with their career. Vivian pulled out her tablet, bringing up what looked like policy documents. Flexible scheduling options, core hours instead of rigid 9-to-5 expectations, remote work capabilities, better parental leave policies, support for childcare costs. Evan stared at her. You're redesigning company policy because of one conversation with my 6-year-old? I'm redesigning company policy because it's the right thing to do. Vivian's voice was firm. And because I've realized that talent comes with life circumstances that don't fit neat corporate boxes. If I want to retain good people, and you are good people, Evan, Excellent people, actually. Then I need to create an environment that acknowledges they have lives outside this office. That's that's incredible, really. But won't the other partners push back? This is a pretty significant cultural shift. Vivian's smile turned sharp. Let them push back. I control 60% of the firm. My decision is final. There was the Vivian Hart Evan knew, the one who made things happen through sheer force of will and brilliant strategic thinking. But now he could see the human underneath, the woman who'd lost her mother too young and understood what it meant to need support that never came. Thank you, Evan said quietly. This will make a real difference. For me, and I'm sure for others. You're welcome. Vivian set down the tablet. But I need something from you in return. Ah, here it was. The catch, the condition, the quid pro quo that turned generosity into transaction. What do you need? Honesty. Vivian's gaze was steady. If the workload becomes unsustainable, if the hours don't work, if you need accommodations we haven't thought of, I need you to tell me. No more silent suffering. No more pretending everything is fine when it's not. That's it? Just honesty? It's not a small thing, Evan. Most people in your position would rather burn out quietly than admit they're struggling. Pride, fear of seeming weak, concern about job security. There are a dozen reasons people don't ask for help even when they desperately need it. Evan thought about the nights he'd stayed up until 2 a.m. finishing work after Miles went to bed. The mornings he'd survived on coffee and willpower when his alarm went off after too little sleep. The constant calculation of whether he was failing more as a parent or as an architect, never quite succeeding at either. Okay, he said. I can do honesty. Good. Vivian moved back behind her desk, the signal that this unprecedented personal conversation was ending, transitioning back to professional mode. Now, let's discuss the Riverside project. I reviewed your facade designs over the weekend. Evan's stomach tensed. Here it came. The critique, the 17 things he'd done wrong, the ways he'd fallen short of her impossible standards. But Vivian pulled up his renderings on her monitor and said, They're excellent. The way you've integrated the residential and commercial elements while maintaining visual coherence is exactly what the client asked for. I have a few minor notes on the street-level entrance, but overall, this is strong work. Evan actually felt dizzy. Vivian Hart thought his work was excellent. Excellent, not adequate or acceptable or sufficient for now. Excellent. Thank you, he managed. Don't thank me for recognizing quality when I see it. But she was almost smiling. I want you to present these to the client on Friday. Full presentation, your design choices, your vision for the space. You usually handle client presentations. And now you're going to handle this one. It's your design. You should defend it. Vivian made a note on her tablet. Consider it part of your professional development. You're talented enough to lead projects, Evan. You just need the confidence to claim that role. The conversation shifted to logistics after that. Presentation format, client expectations, timeline for revisions. But Evan's mind was still processing everything that had happened in the last 30 minutes. His boss, his terrifying, brilliant boss, had opened up about her childhood, acknowledged his parenting challenges, promised to restructure company policy, and called his work excellent. Saturday's beach encounter had somehow cracked open a door he hadn't even known existed. When Evan finally left Vivian's office 45 minutes later, the entire floor seemed to be watching him. He could feel the speculation, the curiosity about what had happened behind that closed door. Long meetings with Vivian usually meant someone was getting reprimanded or fired. They didn't usually end with the employee looking slightly stunned but intact. Sarah Chen, a fellow senior architect whose desk was near Evan's, caught his eye and mouthed, "You okay?" Evan nodded, still processing. More than okay, actually. Possibly having an out-of-body experience, but definitely okay. He made it back to his desk, sat down, and stared at his computer screen without actually seeing anything on it. His phone buzzed with the text from Miles's school, something about picture day next week, and Evan added it to his calendar with the automatic efficiency of someone who'd been managing solo parenting logistics for years. So you survived. Sarah rolled her chair over to his desk, voice low. She didn't actually murder you and hide your body in one of her architectural models? No murder, just talking. Vivian Hart doesn't just talk to employees for 45 minutes. What happened? Evan considered how much to share. Sarah was a friend, as much as anyone could be friends with a coworker when you never had time for social events or after-work drinks. She knew he had a kid, knew his schedule was complicated, but they'd never discussed the details. She's implementing some new policies, he said carefully. Flexible scheduling, better support for parents. She wanted my input. Sarah's eyebrows shot up. She wanted your input? On policy? Apparently. Wow, that's actually really progressive. Good for her. Sarah glanced toward Vivian's office. Maybe she's going through something. Midlife crisis, early retirement planning, alien body snatchers? Maybe she's just trying to be a better boss. Since when does Vivian Hart care about being liked? There's a difference between being liked and being fair. Evan pulled up his Riverside files, trying to signal that this conversation was over. And maybe she's always been more fair than we gave her credit for. Sarah rolled back to her own desk, still looking confused but willing to let it drop. The morning progressed into afternoon, marked by coffee refills and email responses and the steady rhythm of work. Evan presented his Riverside updates at the team meeting, received constructive feedback from the junior architects, and managed to avoid any more one-on-one interactions with Vivian. But he felt her awareness of him, subtle but present. When he contributed ideas in the meeting, she listened with focus that felt different from before. When he mentioned needing to leave by 5:30, she nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world instead of an inconvenience to work around. Something had shifted. The power dynamic was still there. She was still his boss, still the brilliant architect whose approval he sought, but now there was understanding underneath it, recognition of each other as whole people with lives that extended beyond these office walls. Evan left at exactly 5:30, as always, but for the first time in 3 years, he didn't feel guilty about it. He picked up Miles from aftercare, listened to a detailed report about the grasshopper they'd found at recess, stopped at the grocery store for ingredients that would hopefully become dinner. Their apartment felt smaller after spending Saturday at the beach, but it was home. Evan made spaghetti while Miles did homework at the kitchen table, simple math problems that still required supervision and encouragement. Dad, is 5 plus 7 11 or 12? I keep forgetting. Let's count it out. You've got 5 fingers on one hand. They worked through it together, Evan stirring pasta sauce with one hand and helping Miles visualize addition with the other. This was his life. Constant multitasking, perpetual motion, never quite catching up but never quite falling behind either. His phone rang just as they were sitting down to eat. Unknown number, Boston area code. Evan almost didn't answer, but years of single parenting had trained him to pick up every call just in case it was the school or the doctor or something important. Hello? Evan, it's Vivian. He nearly dropped his fork. Oh, hi. Is everything okay? Did something happen with the Riverside project? No, nothing like that. I'm sorry to call after hours. I realize that's exactly the kind of boundary violation we discussed this morning. It's fine. What's up? Miles was watching him with interest, slurping spaghetti. Evan put the phone on speaker so he could eat while talking. I wanted to ask you something personal, and it felt inappropriate to do it at the office. Vivian's voice sounded different over the phone, less formal, more uncertain. You can absolutely say no. Okay? Rachel reminded me that it's her daughter's birthday this weekend. My niece, Emma. She's turning 8, and there's a party at this indoor playground place in Newton. A pause. Rachel suggested I might want to bring a guest, someone who understands the chaos of child-focused events. Evan's brain short-circuited. Was his boss inviting him to a children's birthday party? You want me to go to your niece's birthday party? I know it's strange. We're not friends. We barely know each other outside of work context. And I have no business blurring professional boundaries like this. Vivian sounded genuinely uncomfortable, which was almost more disorienting than the invitation itself. But Saturday was the first time I've enjoyed a child-focused activity in years, possibly ever. And I hoped, that having someone there who actually knows how to navigate these situations might make it less awkward. Less awkward for you? I'm terrible with children. I never know what to say or how to interact. They sense my discomfort and either avoid me or use me as a climbing structure. Neither is ideal. Despite the surreal nature of this conversation, Evan found himself smiling. You did fine with Miles. Miles is exceptional, and he did most of the talking. There was a smile in Vivian's voice now, too. But seriously, if this is overstepping, please say so. I'll understand completely. We can pretend this call never happened. Evan looked at Miles, who was now very interested in this conversation. Hold on 1 second. He muted the phone. That's the lady from the beach. She's inviting us to a birthday party for her niece. You want to go? Miles's face lit up. A birthday party? With cake? Presumably with cake. That's pretty standard for birthday parties. Can we go? Please, please, please? Evan unmuted the phone. We'd love to come. What time and where? The relief in Vivian's voice was palpable. Saturday at 2. I'll text you the address. And Evan, thank you. Really? No problem. Fair warning, though, Miles is extremely enthusiastic about birthday parties. He might try to make friends with everyone there. That sounds perfect, actually. Someone should be enthusiastic. They said goodbye, and Evan set down his phone, looking at his son who was practically vibrating with excitement. We're going to a party, a real party with kids and cake, and probably games. Looks like it. Is your boss lady going to be there? Her name is Vivian, and yes, she'll be there. She's the birthday girl's aunt. Miles considered this. So we're kind of like her friends now? Evan twirled spaghetti around his fork, thinking about the day's events. The honest conversation in Vivian's office. The policy changes. The way she'd called him after hours, sounding uncertain and almost vulnerable, asking for help navigating a social situation. Yeah, buddy, I guess maybe we are. The rest of the week passed in a blur of work and parenting and trying not to overthink the fact that he was apparently friends with his boss now. Or something like friends. The definition was unclear, the boundaries uncertain, the whole situation unprecedented in Evan's carefully compartmentalized life. Wednesday brought the first visible changes from Vivian's policy initiative. An email went out to the entire firm announcing new flexible scheduling options, expanded parental leave, and a commitment to accommodating employees with caregiving responsibilities. The reaction was mixed: enthusiasm from the younger architects who valued work-life balance, confusion from the old guard who'd built their careers on 60-hour weeks and unlimited availability. Sarah caught Evan in the break room. Did you have something to do with this? Why would you think that? Because you had that mysterious meeting with Vivian on Monday, and now suddenly she's revolutionizing company culture. Sarah poured coffee, studying him. She talked to you about being a parent, didn't she? Maybe. Evan Hale, secret influencer of corporate policy. Who knew? But Sarah was smiling. Seriously, though, this is good. I've got a sister who's been putting off having kids because she didn't think she could manage it with this job. Maybe now she'll reconsider. Thursday, Evan worked on his Riverside presentation, rehearsing his talking points, refining his slides. Vivian stopped by his desk around 3. A casual check-in that would have been unremarkable except that Vivian didn't do casual check-ins. How's the presentation coming? Good, I think. I'm nervous about the client's reaction to the material choices, but the structural elements are solid. Trust your instincts. You know this project better than anyone. She glanced at his screen, noting something. That rendering of the courtyard space, did you adjust the lighting? Yeah, I thought the afternoon sun would showcase the architectural details better than morning light. Good eye. That's exactly the kind of thinking that wins clients. She straightened. I'll see you tomorrow for the run-through. And Saturday at the party, if we don't spontaneously combust from the awkwardness of socializing outside the office. I'm sure we'll survive. Your optimism is noted. But she was almost smiling as she walked away. Friday's client presentation went better than Evan had dared to hope. The clients, a development company with deep pockets and deeper opinions, loved his facade designs, asking intelligent questions that showed they understood his vision. Vivian sat in on the meeting but let Evan take the lead, only stepping in twice to clarify technical specifications. Afterward, she pulled him aside. Excellent work. You handled their concerns about the material costs particularly well. Thanks. I wasn't sure if the sustainability argument would land, but they seemed receptive. More than receptive. You just secured approval for the next phase. Vivian paused. This is what leadership looks like, Evan. Remember that. He went home that evening feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Professional confidence. Not just competence, he'd always been competent, but actual confidence that he belonged at this level, that his ideas had value, that he could do more than just survive in this career. Miles noticed the change immediately. You're smiling a lot today, Dad. I had a good day at work. Because of Vivian? Partially because of Vivian, yeah. She's really nice. I'm glad we're her friends. Evan pulled Miles in for a hug, the small person who somehow always knew exactly what mattered. Me too, buddy. Me too. Saturday morning, Evan stood in front of his closet again, but this time the question wasn't about professional appropriateness. It was about how you dressed for a children's birthday party that you were attending with your boss who might or might not be your friend now. He went with jeans and a casual button-down. Not too formal, not too sloppy. The Goldilocks zone of social ambiguity. Miles, of course, had no such concerns. He wore his favorite shirt with dinosaurs on it and mismatched socks because the matching ones are boring, Dad. They arrived at the indoor playground 15 minutes early. Evan's habitual punctuality making it impossible to be fashionably late, and found a massive facility filled with inflatable obstacles, climbing structures, and the kind of controlled chaos that made insurance companies nervous. Rachel spotted them first. You made it, and you must be Miles. I've heard all about you and the famous sandcastle. Miles beamed. We made a working bridge. So I heard, very impressive. Rachel turned to Evan. Thank you for coming. Vivian's been a nervous wreck about this party, convinced she's going to accidentally traumatize Emma's friends with her complete inability to relate to children. Where is she? Hiding by the snack table, probably. Rachel grinned. Go rescue her. I need to wrangle the rest of the guests. Evan found Vivian exactly where Rachel had predicted, standing near a table laden with juice boxes and fruit kebabs, looking like she was preparing for battle. You came, she said, relief evident. We came. Miles has been talking about this party all week. I brought a present, but I have no idea if it's appropriate. Rachel said Emma likes science, so I got her a chemistry set, but now I'm concerned that's too advanced or potentially dangerous or... Vivian, it's fine. Science kits are great. She took a breath. Right, fine. Chemistry set. Totally normal gift. Evan had never seen her like this. Uncertain, second-guessing herself, completely out of her element. It was humanizing in a way that made his chest tight. You're going to be fine, he said quietly. Just be yourself. Kids respond to authenticity. Myself is a workaholic perfectionist who communicates primarily through criticism. Yourself is also someone who spent 20 minutes on a beach helping a 6-year-old build a bridge and made him feel like his ideas mattered. Evan smiled. That person is good with kids. You just have to let her show up. Vivian looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Before she could respond, a small tornado in a birthday crown descended upon them. Aunt Viv, you're here! Emma, 8 years old with Rachel's features and an energy level that suggested several espressos, launched herself at Vivian with complete confidence that she'd be caught. Vivian caught her, stumbling slightly but managing to stay upright. Happy birthday, Emma. Did you bring Miles? Mom said you were bringing a friend with a kid my age. Well, not my age exactly, but close enough for party purposes. I'm Miles, Miles announced himself, never one to wait for formal introductions. I'm 6, but I'll be 7 in 4 months. Do you like dinosaurs? Dinosaurs are cool. Do you like slime? I've never made slime, but I've always wanted to. We're making slime at this party. And there's an obstacle course and pizza and cake, and Mom said I could invite 12 friends, and there's presents, and... Emma, breathe, Vivian said, setting her niece down. Use your words at a speed that allows for comprehension. Emma giggled. You sound like Mom. Terrifying thought. The party unfolded with the expected chaos, children everywhere, parents clustering in survival groups, noise levels that would violate sound ordinances. Evan watched Vivian navigate it with the same focused intensity she brought to client meetings, asking Emma about her friends, helping set up the slime-making station, even participating in a round of musical chairs that ended with her looking both horrified and oddly pleased when she won. I didn't know musical chairs was competitive, she said, slightly breathless. Everything's competitive when kids are involved, Evan replied. Noted. Miles and Emma had bonded instantly over shared enthusiasm for messy crafts and were now creating slime concoctions that defied both physics and good taste. Evan and Vivian had somehow ended up as the designated adult supervisors for the slime table, which meant preventing children from eating glue while trying not to get covered in the stuff themselves. This is definitely not in my job description, Vivian said, wiping green slime off her hand. Welcome to the glamorous world of child supervision. Do you do this often? Birthday parties and slime and controlled chaos? When I can, Miles gets invited to parties sometimes, though we can't always make it work with the schedule. Evan handed her a paper towel. It's good for him, though, social development, learning to share, all that important kid stuff. You're very good at this. The whole parenting thing. I'm mediocre at best. I just show up and hope for positive outcomes. That's more than a lot of people do. Vivian watched Miles and Emma collaborate on a particularly sparkly slime creation. My father never came to things like this. Rachel and I had birthday parties, but he'd make an appearance, give us expensive gifts, then disappear back to his office. We learned early not to expect more. That must have been lonely. It was normal. You don't miss what you never had. But her voice suggested otherwise. The party reached its crescendo with cake, elaborate, multi-tiered, decorated with fondant science equipment because Emma was going to be a chemist when she grows up, or maybe an astronaut, or possibly both. The children sang off-key, Emma made a wish and blew out candles, and everyone descended on the sugar rush with predictable enthusiasm. Evan found himself standing next to Rachel during the cake distribution. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. Vivian hasn't looked this relaxed at a family event in years, possibly ever. I think she's just getting used to kids. No, it's more than that. She's getting used to being human. Rachel watched her sister help Emma cut cake, the two of them laughing over something. After our mom died, Vivian kind of locked herself away. Emotionally, I mean. She became this perfect, driven machine. Successful, brilliant, completely isolated. I've been worried about her for years. And now? Now she's at a birthday party making slime and looking genuinely happy. That's progress I didn't think was possible. Rachel turned to him. Whatever you did on that beach, whatever you're doing now, thank you. I'm not doing anything. We're friends, I guess. Vivian doesn't have friends. She has colleagues and professional contacts and people she tolerates at family gatherings. Rachel smiled. You're something different. Don't underestimate that. The party wound down eventually, children claimed by parents, gifts loaded into cars, the staff beginning cleanup of the slime-covered aftermath. Miles was sugar high and chattering nonstop about Emma and the obstacle course and how this was definitely the best party ever except maybe for his own birthday. But this one was really, really close. Evan collected their things, said goodbye to Rachel and Emma, and looked around for Vivian. He found her in a quiet corner, sitting on one of the foam blocks, looking tired but content. You survived, he said. I survived, though I may never look at glitter glue the same way again. Part of the experience. She stood up, brushing glitter off her jeans, casual jeans, not the power suits from work. Thank you for coming, and for making this less terrifying than it would have been alone. You did great. Emma clearly adores you. Emma adores everyone. She has her mother's social gifts. Vivian smiled. But yes, it was nice, better than I expected. They walked out together, Miles running ahead to the car. In the parking lot, Vivian paused. I know Monday will be back to normal, back to being boss and employee, professional boundaries, all the appropriate workplace dynamics. Probably for the best. Probably, but maybe not completely back to how it was before? She said it tentatively, like she was testing uncertain ground. Evan thought about the week they'd had. The honest conversations, the policy changes, the gradual reshaping of their relationship from purely professional to something more complex. No, he agreed. Not completely back. Good. Vivian pulled out her keys. I'll see you Monday then. See you Monday. He watched her drive away, then climbed into his own car where Miles was already half asleep despite the sugar rush. Dad? Yeah, buddy. I like Vivian. She's nice. And Emma's really cool. Can we be friends with them more? Evan started the engine, pulling out of the parking lot. Yeah, Miles. I think we can be friends with them more. The drive home was quiet except for the radio playing softly. Evan's mind wandered over the strange trajectory of the past week, from accidental beach encounter to policy revolution to children's birthday parties. His life had gotten decidedly more complicated. But as he glanced in the rearview mirror at Miles dozing in his car seat, sticky with cake and covered in glitter, Evan realized that complicated wasn't necessarily bad. Sometimes complicated was just life opening up new possibilities. Sometimes it was exactly what you needed, even if you hadn't known you were looking for it. The following weeks settled into a rhythm that would have seemed impossible a month earlier. Evan still arrived at the office before dawn, still left precisely at 5:30, still balanced the impossible juggling act of single parenthood and professional ambition. But now there were small differences that accumulated into something significant. Vivian stopped by his desk more often, ostensibly to discuss projects, but occasionally veering into conversations about Miles's latest obsession with space exploration or Evan's ongoing battle with the broken toaster. She started scheduling important meetings before 3 p.m., citing efficiency but clearly accommodating the parents on staff who needed to handle school pickups. The office culture shifted incrementally, becoming slightly less rigid, slightly more human. And somehow, without either of them quite planning it, Evan and Vivian fell into the habit of having coffee together on Thursday mornings. It started accidentally 3 weeks after the birthday party. Evan had been in early working on the Henderson Museum project, a renovation that required delicate balance between historical preservation and modern accessibility, when Vivian emerged from her office looking like she'd been there all night. "Please tell me there's coffee," she'd said, her usual composure frayed at the edges. "Fresh pot. I made it strong enough to strip paint." "Perfect." She'd poured herself a cup and settled into the chair beside his desk instead of returning to her office. They talked about the museum project, about the challenges of working with historical societies who had opinions about everything, about the satisfaction of solving problems that seemed impossible at first. The next Thursday, she'd appeared at 7 a.m. with 2 cups from the fancy coffee place down the street. "I owed you for last week." The Thursday after that, Evan had brought pastries from the bakery near Miles's school. Miles insisted. "Apparently I'm not allowed to have coffee meetings without bringing food." It became their routine. Thursday mornings, before the office filled with noise and demands, they'd sit in the quiet and talk. Sometimes about work, sometimes about their lives, occasionally about nothing in particular. Vivian was surprisingly easy to talk to once you got past the intimidating exterior. She had sharp wit and unexpected humor, strong opinions about architecture and weaker ones about everything else, a vulnerability she showed so rarely that Evan felt honored when she let it surface. "My father called last night," she said one Thursday in late June, cupping her coffee like it was a shield. "He wants to have dinner, discuss the firm's quarterly performance, as if I need his input on the company I built." "Are you going?" "Probably. Rachel says I should maintain the relationship, that he's getting older and I'll regret it if I don't." Vivian's jaw tightened, but every conversation with him feels like a performance review I'm destined to fail. "Does he know how successful you are?" "He knows the numbers. Revenue, client retention, industry awards. What he doesn't understand is that success isn't just metrics on a spreadsheet." She paused. "He asked about my personal life, whether I was seeing anyone, as if romantic partnership was another box to check on the achievement list." Evan treaded carefully. "Are you seeing anyone?" "No, I haven't had time for dating in years. Haven't had the interest, honestly." Vivian looked at him over the rim of her coffee cup. "What about you? Miles mentioned his mother moved to New York. Do you two still—" "No, we're civil for Miles's sake, but that's it. She remarried last year, some finance guy who works 80-hour weeks and probably has never attended a parent-teacher conference in his life." "That bothers you." "It bothers me that she chose someone exactly like what we were running from. We split because she wanted more money, more status, more of everything except time with our kid. And she found it. Good for her." The bitterness surprised him. Evan had thought he'd made peace with his ex-wife's choices, but apparently some wounds stayed tender. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Miles is lucky to have you. Miles deserves 2 parents who show up. He got 1.5 on a good day. 1 committed parent is better than 2 distracted ones. She said it with conviction that suggested personal experience. Trust me on that. Their eyes met, and Evan felt the weight of understanding pass between them. They were both products of absent fathers, both trying to be better than what they'd been given, both carrying wounds that shaped how they moved through the world. Thank you, Evan said quietly. For these mornings, for making the office less suffocating. Is that what I've done? I thought I was just avoiding my actual responsibilities by drinking overpriced coffee with you. You can do both. Vivian's smile was small but genuine. Apparently so. The Henderson Museum project consumed most of Evan's attention through July. It was the kind of assignment that should have gone to a partner, not a senior architect, but Vivian had insisted he take the lead. The museum board was demanding, the historical constraints were complex, and the budget was tight enough to require creative problem-solving at every turn. Evan loved it. This was the work he'd dreamed about in architecture school, meaningful projects that required both technical skill and artistic vision, buildings that would outlast him and matter to communities. He stayed up late sketching concepts after Miles went to bed, arrived early to refine his designs, pushed himself harder than he had in years. And Vivian was there every step of the way. Not micromanaging, but supporting. She attended his presentations to the museum board, backing his ideas with her considerable reputation. She fought for his vision when conservative board members wanted something safer, more traditional. She treated him like a partner in this project, not a subordinate executing her orders. You're going to win an award for this, she said one afternoon, reviewing his latest renderings. This is career-defining work, Evan. It's not done yet. Plenty of time for it to fall apart. It won't. You're too good at this. She pointed to a detail in his courtyard design. This integration of the glass atrium with the original stonework. It's brilliant, honors the history while creating something entirely new. The praise made Evan's chest warm. Coming from Vivian Hart, brilliant wasn't hyperbole. It was earned. I couldn't have done this without you, he admitted. The board would have eaten me alive without your support. The board are cowards who default to mediocrity unless someone forces them to be brave. Vivian's smile was sharp. I just gave them permission to choose excellence. Is that what I am? Excellent? You're exceptional. Different category entirely. She said it matter-of-factly, like she was stating an obvious truth. The sooner you recognize that, the more dangerous you'll become. Evan didn't know how to respond to that, so he changed the subject to cantilever specifications and load calculations. But the words stayed with him. Exceptional. Dangerous. Coming from Vivian, they felt like prophecy. Miles started summer camp in early July, a science-focused program at the museum that Emma also attended. Rachel had suggested it, mentioning that the cousins could carpool, and suddenly Evan's mornings involved coordinating with Vivian's sister in ways that blurred the lines between professional and personal even further. Emma says Miles is teaching the other kids about constellations, Rachel reported one morning during drop-off. Apparently he's become the astronomy expert of the 6-year-old set. He's been obsessed with space since we watched that documentary about Mars rovers. Evan watched Miles and Emma race toward the museum entrance, backpacks bouncing. I'm just glad he's making friends. He's good for Emma. She's used to being the loudest person in any room, but Miles actually listens to her ideas and builds on them instead of just competing for attention. That's his dad's influence. Evan's a good listener too. They both turned to find Vivian approaching, looking slightly flustered in a way that was becoming familiar. She'd been joining Rachel for camp drop-off when her schedule allowed, claiming it was convenient since the museum was near the office. Evan suspected it had more to do with wanting to be involved in Emma's life in ways she'd never attempted before. I'm just stating facts, Vivian said, falling into step with them as they headed back to the parking lot. Evan listens instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. It's a rare quality. I'm standing right here, Evan pointed out. I'm aware. That's why I'm complimenting you to your face instead of behind your back like a civilized person. Rachel laughed. You two are ridiculous. Just admit you're friends already. We're colleagues, Vivian said automatically, who have coffee every Thursday morning and attend birthday parties together and coordinate childcare logistics. Rachel's grin was wicked, very professional. Rachel, I'm just saying, Viv, you're allowed to have friends. It's not against some code you've invented for yourself. Vivian's jaw tightened in that way that meant she was uncomfortable but trying not to show it. Evan jumped in to save her. We should get going. I've got the museum board meeting at 9. Right. The board. Vivian seized the escape route gratefully. Rachel, we'll see you at pickup. They walked to their cars in silence that felt charged with things unsaid. When they reached Vivian's vehicle, a sleek sedan that probably cost more than Evan made in a year, she paused. I'm sorry about Rachel. She doesn't understand boundaries. She understands them fine. She just thinks you take them too seriously. Do you think that? Vivian's gaze was direct, challenging. Evan considered his answer carefully. I think you've built walls for good reasons. Protecting yourself, maintaining professional authority, avoiding the complications that come with letting people in. I don't judge that. But I also think those walls are lonely. And maybe you don't need them as much as you think you do. Vivian looked away, out toward the museum where their kids were learning about science and making memories. Every time I've let the walls down, I've regretted it. People disappoint. They leave. They prioritize their needs over yours and act surprised when you're hurt by it. Not everyone. Enough people. She turned back to him. My mother left by dying. My father left by choosing work. Every relationship I've attempted has ended with some version of you're too much or too demanding or too focused on your career. I learned to stop trying. I'm not asking you to try, Evan said gently. I'm just saying that Rachel's right. We are friends, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be complicated or risky. It's just two people who understand each other, having coffee and occasionally supervising children together. Vivian's expression softened. When did you become wise? Years of negotiating with a 6-year-old. You learn to see past the surface arguments to what people actually need. And what do I need? Same thing we all need. To be seen, understood, not judged for the choices we've made to survive. Evan smiled. Plus decent coffee and someone who appreciates your architectural genius. I don't know about genius. You redesigned the entire waterfront development from memory when the client lost the original files, in one night. That's either genius or wizardry, and I'm pretty sure wizards aren't real. That pulled a genuine laugh from her, breaking the tension. Fair point. Genius it is. See? You're learning to accept compliments. I'm such a good influence. Don't push your luck, Hale. But she was smiling as she said it, and when they arrived at the office 15 minutes later, the mood had shifted back to comfortable. They worked side by side on the museum presentation, Evan handling the design specifics while Vivian managed the political strategy. It was a partnership that worked seamlessly, their skills complementing each other in ways that made the final product stronger than either could have created alone. The board meeting went well. Evan presented his vision for the atrium renovation with confidence that surprised him, fielding questions about structural integrity and historical accuracy with ease. Vivian interjected strategically, her endorsement carrying weight that silenced the skeptics. Afterward, the board chair, a formidable woman in her 70s who'd terrified Evan at every previous meeting, pulled him aside. Young man, you've done something remarkable here. This design honors our past while giving us a future worth having. I'm impressed. Coming from Catherine Morrison, that was practically a knighthood. Thank you, Mrs. Morrison. That means a great deal. Vivian speaks very highly of you. She's not easily impressed, so I trust her judgment. Catherine's sharp eyes assessed him. You're lucky to have her as a mentor. I am, Evan agreed, glancing at Vivian across the room where she was fielding questions from another board member. She's pushed me to be better than I thought I could be. Good mentors do that. They see potential we can't see ourselves and refuse to let us settle for less. Catherine patted his arm. Don't waste it. The words followed Evan through the rest of the day, echoing in his mind during meetings and design sessions and the commute home. Don't waste it. The potential, the opportunity, the rare gift of someone believing in you completely. He picked up Miles from camp to stories about the molecular structure of water and how Miss Jennifer said he could be a scientist when he grew up if he wanted. Can I be a scientist and an architect? Miles asked over dinner, grilled cheese because Evan was too tired for anything more ambitious. You can be whatever you want, buddy. Multiple things, even. Life's not a multiple choice test where you only get one answer. Is that what you tell yourself about Vivian? Evan nearly choked on his sandwich. What? Emma says her Aunt Viv likes you, like really likes you. And I said you like her too because you smile different when you talk about her. I smile different? Yeah, like this. Miles demonstrated an expression that was probably meant to be dopey, but mostly just looked like he was constipating. All goofy. I do not smile like that. Do too. Emma noticed it too. We compared notes. You compared notes with Emma about my facial expressions? We're very observant. Miles said it with the seriousness of a child who'd learned a new word and was determined to use it. So, do you like her? Like grown-up like? This conversation had ventured into territory Evan was completely unprepared to navigate. He bought time by taking another bite of grilled cheese, chewing slowly while his brain scrambled for an appropriate response. The truth was complicated. Did he like Vivian? Yes, absolutely. She was brilliant and challenging and surprisingly kind beneath the armor she wore. Their Thursday morning coffee sessions had become the highlight of his week. He looked forward to seeing her, valued her opinion, felt something warm and complicated in his chest when she smiled at him. But like? The romantic kind of like that came with expectations and vulnerability and the potential for everything to blow up spectacularly? That was a question Evan had been carefully not asking himself. Vivian is my friend and my boss, he said carefully. Those are two separate things that are already complicated enough without adding anything else. But if she wasn't your boss, would you like her then? Miles, it's just a question, Dad. You always tell me questions are how we learn. Evan was definitely regretting that particular parenting philosophy. Yes, if circumstances were different, I might feel differently about Vivian. But circumstances aren't different, and some things are better left as they are. Why? Because grown-up relationships are complicated. Adding romance to a friendship can ruin the friendship, and I value Vivian's friendship too much to risk losing it. Miles processed this with the thoughtful expression he got when working through complex ideas. But what if it made the friendship better? What if you could be friends and also other stuff? Then that would be wonderful. But it's not something I can control. It takes two people wanting the same thing at the same time, and that's pretty rare. Do you think Vivian wants the same thing? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? Evan thought about the way Vivian looked at him sometimes, like she was seeing something she hadn't expected to find. The way she'd opened up about her past, her father, her fears, the small touches that had become almost natural. A hand on his shoulder during meetings, fingers brushing when they reached for the same coffee pot. The time she'd absently tucked a strand of hair behind his ear while reviewing blueprints together. Were those signs of romantic interest? Or just the physical comfort that came with friendship? Evan had been out of the dating game so long he honestly couldn't tell. I don't know what Vivian wants, he said finally, and I'm not going to risk our working relationship and friendship by assuming. That's very mature of you, Dad. Thank you. But also kind of boring. Evan laughed despite himself. Yeah, well, boring keeps our lives stable. Exciting tends to blow things up. Sometimes things need to blow up, Miles said wisely. Like in science experiments, that's how you learn. I'm not conducting experiments with my personal life. Maybe you should. Could be fun. Out of the mouths of babes, Evan cleared their plates, filed away this conversation under things to stress about at 3 a.m., and moved on to the evening routine of homework supervision and bath time and the bedtime story that Miles insisted on, even though he could read perfectly well himself. I like when you do the voices, Miles explained, snuggled under his dinosaur print comforter. You make the characters sound real. They were reading a book about a girl who discovered a door to another world, full of magic and danger, and the kind of adventures that seemed impossible in everyday life. Evan did his best with the voices, making the villain properly menacing and the hero appropriately brave, while his mind wandered to his own life. What would happen if he opened that door? If he admitted to Vivian that somewhere along the way, friendship had started feeling like something more? That he looked forward to Thursday mornings with an intensity that went beyond professional courtesy? That he'd caught himself imagining what it might be like to kiss her, to hold her hand, to build something together beyond architectural projects? Probably disaster. Almost certainly disaster. Vivian had made it clear that romance wasn't something she had room for in her carefully controlled life. And even if she did have feelings for him, which was a massive assumption, workplace romances were complicated at best and career-ending at worst. Better to leave things as they were. Safe, stable, boring, as Miles would say, but survivable. Evan finished the chapter, tucked Miles in with the ritual 3 kisses on the forehead, and retreated to his own room where he failed spectacularly at not thinking about Vivian Hart. The next day brought unexpected complications in the form of Miles's mother. Jennifer called during Evan's lunch break, which was unusual enough to trigger immediate anxiety. They had a carefully maintained schedule of communication, Sunday evenings for weekly check-ins, emergencies only otherwise. A Friday afternoon call suggested emergency. Evan, we need to talk about summer custody. Not an emergency, just Jennifer being Jennifer, rearranging the world to suit her convenience and expecting everyone else to accommodate. What about summer custody? Richard and I are planning a trip to Europe, 3 weeks in August. We'd like to take Miles with us. Evan's grip on his phone tightened. That's my custody time. We agreed. I know what we agreed. I'm asking for a modification. This is a wonderful opportunity for Miles, culture, travel, exposure to different countries. Surely you can see the educational value. I can see you making plans that affect our son without consulting me first. I'm consulting you now. No, you're informing me and expecting me to agree. Evan kept his voice level with effort. Miles and I have plans for August. Camp, the Science Museum program, time together. You can't just decide to take him for 3 weeks because it's convenient for you. It's not about convenience. It's about giving him experiences you can't provide. When was the last time you took him out of the country, or even out of state? The accusation landed like she knew it would. Evan's budget didn't include international travel. Hell, his budget barely included the occasional weekend at the beach. And Jennifer knew it, weaponized it, used it to make him feel inadequate. Miles doesn't need Europe, Evan said tightly. He needs consistency. He needs both parents showing up for the small moments, not just the Instagram-worthy ones. That's not fair. You moved to New York, Jennifer. You chose a life that put 8 hours of distance between you and your son. Don't lecture me about consistency. The line went quiet. When Jennifer spoke again, her voice had gone cold. I'm not asking for your permission, Evan. I'm informing you as a courtesy. My lawyer says I have grounds to request additional custody time to make up for the geographic distance. Your lawyer is wrong, and if you try to take this to court, I will fight you. On what budget? We both know you can't afford a custody battle. It was a low blow, and they both knew it. But Jennifer had never been above using their financial inequality as leverage. She'd married money, lived in a penthouse in Manhattan, had resources Evan could only dream of, and she'd use every advantage to get what she wanted. Try me, Evan said quietly. You want to explain to a judge why you need 3 weeks in Europe more than Miles needs stability with his primary custodial parent? Go ahead. I'll be there with documentation of every missed weekend, every rescheduled visit, every time you chose work or Richard over our son. You're being unreasonable. I'm being a parent. There's a difference. Evan closed his eyes, trying to find calm. Look, if you want extra time with Miles, we can discuss it, but not like this. Not with ultimatums and threats. We're supposed to be co-parents, Jennifer. Start acting like it. I'll have my lawyer call you. She hung up before Evan could respond. He sat there in the break room, phone in hand, rage and fear and exhaustion warring in his chest. This was why he'd built walls around his personal life. This was why he kept work and home separate. Because the moment you let people in, they found ways to hurt you. You look like you're contemplating murder. Evan looked up to find Vivian in the doorway, holding her own lunch, a salad from the place across the street that charged obscene prices for lettuce. My ex-wife. She wants to take Miles to Europe for 3 weeks during my custody time. Just informed me like it's a done deal. Is it? Not if I have anything to say about it. Evan set down his phone harder than necessary. Sorry, this isn't your problem. No, but you're clearly upset and we're friends. Friends listen. Vivian sat down across from him. What are you going to do? Fight it, I guess, if she actually files something, which she probably won't because it's just a power play to make me feel small. Does it work, making you feel small? Sometimes, yeah. The admission hurt. She's got money, resources, this perfect life in New York with her perfect husband. And I'm here with my broken toaster and budget constraints and the constant feeling that I'm failing at everything. You're not failing. You're raising an exceptional child while excelling at a demanding career. That's not failure by any definition. Tell that to Jennifer. I'd rather tell that to you since you're the one who needs to hear it. Vivian's voice was firm. Your ex-wife is threatened by you, not because you have more than her, clearly you don't in financial terms, but because you have Miles's heart in a way she never will. That's what this is about. Evan looked at her, surprised. You think so? I know so. I've seen it before. My father did the same thing with Rachel and me after our mother died. He'd swoop in with expensive gifts and exotic trips, trying to buy affection he hadn't earned through presents. It didn't work. We knew who showed up for the everyday moments, even if it was just a nanny. Vivian's expression was sad. Miles knows too. He knows you're the one who makes pancakes and reads stories and builds sandcastles. No European vacation can compete with that. She has a lawyer. Then get one too. A good one. I can't afford. I know someone. She does family law, handles cases pro bono sometimes for people who deserve it. I'll give you her number. Vivian pulled out her phone, making a note. And before you protest about charity or pride, consider it payback for all the Thursday mornings you've listened to me complain about my father. That's not the same. It's exactly the same. Friends help each other. She looked at him directly. Let me help you, Evan, please. The please did it. Vivian Hart didn't say please often, didn't ask for permission to be generous. If she was asking now, it meant something. Okay, Evan said quietly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Martha is terrifying. She's going to ask you approximately 10,000 questions about your parenting arrangements and take notes like she's preparing for trial. Vivian's smile was slight. But she's brilliant, and if your ex-wife actually files something, Martha will destroy her. I just want joint custody to stay joint. I don't want to fight. I just want my time with my son. Then that's what we'll make sure you get. The we settled over Evan like a warm blanket. Not, I'll help you, but we'll do this together. Partnership, solidarity. The kind of support he'd convinced himself he didn't need because needing people meant risking disappointment. But Vivian had shown up. Again and again, she'd shown up. Through weird beach encounters and policy changes and birthday parties, and now this, offering help without judgment, support without strings. Maybe Miles was right. Maybe some walls needed to come down. That evening, after Miles was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Evan sat on his couch with a beer he barely touched and let himself think about what he wanted. He wanted the Henderson Museum project to succeed. He wanted Miles to grow up confident and kind. He wanted to stop feeling like he was perpetually one crisis away from falling apart. And he wanted Vivian, not just as a friend or a boss or Thursday morning coffee companion. He wanted to know what her hair felt like loose instead of pulled back. Wanted to hear her laugh, really laugh, the kind that came from joy instead of politeness. Wanted to build something together that had nothing to do with architecture and everything to do with trust and partnership and the terrifying possibility of love. But wanting and having were different things, especially when having risked everything he'd carefully constructed, his job, his friendship with Vivian, the stability Miles needed. So Evan finished his beer, went to bed, and filed his wants in the same place he'd been filing them for weeks. Somewhere safe. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere they couldn't complicate the good thing he had going, even if that good thing was starting to feel like not quite enough. Martha Chen turned out to be exactly as advertised, terrifying, brilliant, and armed with questions that stripped away any pretense Evan might have had about his custody situation. They met in her office the following Tuesday, a space that managed to be both welcoming and intimidating. Family photos lined one wall, professional credentials lined another, and Martha herself sat behind a desk that had clearly witnessed countless difficult conversations. Vivian speaks very highly of you, Martha said, gesturing for Evan to sit. She doesn't do that lightly, so I'm already inclined to help. but I need complete honesty from you. Everything. Even the parts that make you look bad. Over the next hour, Evan laid out his entire history with Jennifer. The marriage that had been more about timing than compatibility. The pregnancy that had accelerated their timeline. The growing rift as Jennifer's career ambitions outpaced her interest in parenting. The divorce that had been civil on paper and devastating in practice. The custody arrangement that worked until it didn't. Martha took notes, asked pointed questions, and never once made Evan feel judged for the mess his personal life had become. "Here's the reality," she said when he finished. "Your ex-wife probably won't file anything. This is exactly what you suspected, a power play. She wants you to feel small, to remember that she has resources you don't, to maintain control even from New York. So I just ignore it? You document it. Every communication, every threat, every time she tries to modify the custody agreement without proper channels." Martha pulled out a legal pad, writing in swift strokes. "And you prepare. If she does file, we need to show a pattern of you being the primary custodial parent, the one who shows up consistently, the one who makes sacrifices for your son's well-being." "I can do that." "I know you can. Vivian showed me the character reference she wrote for you. It was glowing enough to make me wonder if you'd paid her, except Vivian Hart doesn't lie about professional assessments." Martha's smile was slight. "She thinks very highly of you, personally and professionally. That counts for something." Evan felt heat crawl up his neck. "We're friends. She's just being supportive." "Mm-hmm." Martha's expression suggested she saw right through that explanation. "Well, your friend has excellent judgment, and she's right that you're doing everything a good parent should do. Document it, Evan. Keep doing what you're doing, and if Jennifer actually files something, we'll bury her with evidence of your consistency." The consultation ended with Martha refusing to charge him for her time. "Vivian prepaid it as a thank you for some work I did for her sister, so argue with her if you have issues." And Evan left feeling simultaneously relieved and more aware than ever of how much he owed Vivian. She was waiting in the lobby when he emerged, ostensibly reading emails on her phone, but clearly positioned to intercept him. "How did it go?" "Martha is terrifying and wonderful. Thank you for connecting us. She thinks Jennifer won't actually file. That's her assessment, which matches mine, but it's good to hear from someone with legal expertise." They walked to the parking garage together, the afternoon sun slanting through the building's glass atrium. Evan struggled with words for what he was feeling. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper that he couldn't quite name. "You didn't have to do this," he said finally. "Pay for the consultation. Write a character reference. Get involved in my messy personal life." "I know I didn't have to. I wanted to." Vivian stopped beside her car, looking at him directly. "You helped me see that I could be different, more present with Emma, more open with Rachel, more human at work. Let me help you too." "It feels unbalanced, like you're giving more than you're getting." "That's not how friendship works, Evan. It's not a ledger where everything has to equal out." Her voice softened. "You've given me something I didn't know I needed, proof that you can be brilliant at your career and still show up for the people you love. That success doesn't require sacrificing your humanity. That's worth more than a legal consultation." Evan's throat tightened. "I don't feel very brilliant most days. I feel like I'm barely holding it together." "We all feel that way. The difference is you keep showing up anyway." Vivian hesitated, then added, "I had dinner with my father last week, the one I was dreading, and for the first time in years I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to him. I just existed in the conversation, held my boundaries, and left without needing his approval." "What changed?" "You, Miles. Watching you parent with such obvious love and dedication while still pursuing your professional goals. It made me realize that my father's approval was never the prize I thought it was." She smiled, sad but genuine. "The prize is being someone I'm proud of, being present for the people who matter. Everything else is just noise." They stood there in the parking garage, afternoon light filtering through concrete levels, and Evan felt the ground shift beneath his feet. This wasn't just friendship. It had stopped being just friendship somewhere between the beach and the birthday party and the Thursday morning coffee sessions. This was connection that ran deeper, possibility that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "Vivian," he started, not sure what he was going to say, but needing to say something. His phone rang. Miles's school, the caller ID announced. Everything else evaporated. I have to take this. Of course. It was the school nurse. Miles had fallen on the playground, hit his head, seemed okay, but they wanted someone to pick him up as a precaution. Evan's heart was already racing as he agreed to be there in 15 minutes. Is he okay? Vivian asked as soon as he hung up. Playground accident. Probably fine, but they want me to get him. Evan was already moving toward his car. I'm sorry, I have to... Go. Of course. Text me when you know he's okay. Evan drove to the school with his mind split between worry about Miles and awareness that something had almost happened in that parking garage. Something significant that would have changed everything. Maybe it was better this way. Interrupted before he could say something he couldn't take back. Miles was fine. A small bump on his forehead, tears from the shock more than actual pain, and a deep investment in convincing Evan that ice cream would help with the healing process. Nice try, buddy. We're going with ice packs, not ice cream. But ice cream is basically the same thing. Frozen dairy is not medical treatment. It is if you believe hard enough. Evan took him home, got him settled on the couch with an ice pack and his favorite shows, and sent Vivian a text. He's fine. Minor bump. Currently arguing that ice cream has medicinal properties. Her response came immediately. That's sound medical reasoning. I support his position. You're not helping. I'm absolutely helping. Child advocacy is important. He's going to use this conversation as evidence. Good. He should learn to cite his sources early. Evan smiled despite his worry, despite the interrupted conversation weighing on his mind. This was Vivian now, playful and present, engaged with his life in ways that felt natural instead of obligatory. When had that happened? When had she become someone he couldn't imagine not talking to? The rest of the week passed in a blur of work and parenting and trying not to think about what he'd almost said in that parking garage. The Henderson Museum project moved into final approval stages, requiring Evan to present to the full board one more time. Vivian coached him through it, refining his presentation until every word landed with precision. You're ready, she said Thursday morning over coffee. Stop second-guessing yourself. What if they hate the courtyard modifications? They won't. You've addressed every concern they raised, incorporated their feedback without compromising the design integrity. This is excellent work. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. Vivian set down her cup. Evan, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know exceptional architecture when I see it, and I know exceptional architects. You're both. The compliment sat warm in his chest. Thank you for believing in me when I wasn't sure I believed in myself. That's what mentors do. Though I think we've moved beyond mentor and mentee at this point. What would you call it now? Vivian considered the question with the same seriousness she brought to design challenges. Partners, maybe. Colleagues who respect each other's work. Friends who've seen each other's vulnerabilities and chosen to stay anyway. That's a lot of things to be at once. Most important relationships are, she met his eyes. That conversation we were having in the parking garage, before Miles's school called. Evan's pulse quickened. Yeah? I've been thinking about it. About what you might have been going to say. Vivian's usual confidence wavered slightly. And I wanted to tell you that whatever it was, I'm ready to hear it, when you're ready to say it. The invitation hung between them, weighted with possibility. Evan could lean in now, bridge the gap they'd been circling for weeks. He could tell her that somewhere between sandcastles and slime and Thursday morning conversations, friendship had evolved into something deeper. That he thought about her constantly, valued her opinion more than anyone's, wanted to build something together that had nothing to do with architecture. But the office was filling up around them. Phones were ringing, colleagues arriving, the workday beginning its familiar rhythm. This wasn't the moment. Not here, not now, not when they could be interrupted at any second. I'll remember that, he said quietly, when the timing is right. Okay? Vivian stood, collecting her coffee cup. But don't wait too long, Evan. Some things are worth the risk. She walked away before he could respond, leaving him with the distinct impression that she'd just said something important, that the ball was in his court, the next move his to make. The Henderson Museum presentation that afternoon was flawless. Evan walked the board through every detail of his design, answered questions with confidence born of preparation, and watched as skeptical faces transformed into impressed ones. When Catherine Morrison stood to applaud at the end, the rest of the board followed. Exceptional work, Mr. Hale. Truly exceptional. This museum will be a landmark for generations because of your vision. Afterward, Vivian pulled him aside in the hallway outside the conference room. You did it. They loved it. We did it. I couldn't have gotten here without your support. You absolutely could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. Her smile was radiant, pride evident in every line of her face. This deserves celebrating. Dinner? I have to pick up Miles. Bring him. We'll go somewhere fun, somewhere he'll enjoy. Rachel and Emma can join us. Make it a real celebration. The idea of celebrating with Vivian, their kids, in some public restaurant where they weren't boss and employee, but just people who cared about each other. It felt monumental, like crossing a line they couldn't uncross. Okay, Evan said, making the decision even as uncertainty churned in his gut. Let's celebrate. They ended up at a pizza place in Cambridge that Emma had been lobbying for, one of those restaurants that catered equally to children and adults, with arcade games in the back and actually decent food up front. Rachel met them there with Emma, who immediately recruited Miles for a quest to win tickets at the skee-ball machines. They're going to blow through $20 in quarters in about 15 minutes, Rachel predicted, watching the kids race toward the arcade section. Worth it for the piece, Vivian said, settling into the booth beside Evan while Rachel took the opposite side. Look at you, choosing chaos over quiet dignity. I barely recognize my sister anymore. I'm evolving. Apparently that's allowed. It's more than allowed. It's wonderful. Rachel's gaze flicked between Vivian and Evan with knowing amusement. And might I say, this celebration feels very couple-y for two people who claim to just be friends. Rachel, Vivian warned. Vivian, what? I'm observing. Emma and I are very observant. We discussed it on the drive over. You discussed your sister's personal life with an 8-year-old? She brought it up. She said Miles told her that Evan smiles all goofy when he talks about you, and I confirmed that you smile the exact same way when you talk about him. It was very scientific. Evan felt heat flood his face. Miles told Emma that I smile goofy? Kids are perceptive, Rachel said cheerfully. They see what adults try to hide. So the question is, are you two going to keep hiding it, or are you going to do something about all this obvious mutual attraction? Rachel, I swear. What? I'm helping. You're both clearly into each other. You've been dancing around it for weeks. Someone needs to point out that the dance is getting ridiculous. Vivian looked like she wanted the booth to swallow her. Evan felt similarly mortified, but also weirdly grateful that someone was saying out loud what they'd been carefully not discussing. It's complicated, Evan said, when it became clear Vivian had been struck temporarily mute. We work together. There are professional considerations, power dynamics, the potential for everything to blow up spectacularly. Or the potential for something wonderful, Rachel countered. Look, I'm not saying throw caution to the wind and start making out in the office, but maybe acknowledge that what you have is more than just friendship. Maybe have an actual conversation about it instead of pretending you're both fine with the status quo when you're clearly not. How do you know we're not fine with the status quo? Vivian had found her voice, though it came out defensive. Because you called me 3 times last week to casually bring Evan up in conversation, and because you've been happier in the last 2 months than I've seen you in years. Rachel's expression softened. I'm not pushing you into anything, Viv. I just don't want you to talk yourself out of something good because you're scared it might not work out. Fear of failure is a valid consideration. Fear of failure is how you've lived your entire life, and it's made you lonely. Rachel said it gently, but the words still landed hard. Maybe it's time to be brave about something that isn't work. The conversation was interrupted by Miles and Emma returning, arms full of tickets and faces glowing with victory. We won so many tickets, Miles announced. Emma's really good at skee-ball. I have a system, Emma explained seriously. You aim for the corners, not the middle. The middle is a trap. They ordered pizza, 3 different kinds to accommodate various preferences, and the conversation shifted to safer topics: school, summer plans, Miles's latest space facts, Emma's determination to build a working volcano for the science fair. The kids dominated the discussion, which gave Evan space to process what Rachel had said. Was he talking himself out of something good because he was scared? Absolutely. Fear had been his constant companion since the divorce, maybe even before. Fear of failing Miles, of not being enough, of letting down people who depended on him. Adding romantic risk to that equation felt like volunteering for additional anxiety. But Rachel was also right that the status quo wasn't sustainable. The feelings weren't going away. They were growing stronger every Thursday morning, every shared smile, every moment when Vivian looked at him like he was someone worth seeing. Across the table, Vivian was helping Emma calculate how many more tickets they'd need to win the giant stuffed penguin in the prize case. Her hair had come loose from its bun, falling around her face in a way that made her look younger and more relaxed. She was laughing at something Emma said, genuine and unguarded, and Evan felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. He was in love with her. The realization landed with quiet certainty. Somewhere between sandcastles and legal consultations and Thursday morning coffee, friendship had become love. Not the desperate, dramatic kind from movies, but something steadier. Something that felt like coming home. The question was what to do about it. After dinner, they walked to the parking lot together while the kids ran ahead, burning off pizza and sugar. "Sorry about Rachel," Vivian said quietly. "She means well, but she has no sense of boundaries. She loves you. She wants you to be happy." "I am happy. Happier than I've been in a long time. But," Evan heard the hesitation in her voice, "but I'm also terrified of screwing this up, of letting you down, of being exactly as bad at relationships as I've always believed I am." Vivian stopped walking, turning to face him. "Everything Rachel said was true. I do smile when I talk about you. I do call her to casually bring you up in conversation. I do think about you more than is strictly professional or even platonic." Evan's heart was hammering. "Vivian, let me finish, please." She took a breath. "I've spent my entire adult life being very good at work and very bad at everything else. And I convinced myself that was fine, that success was enough, that I didn't need the messy complications of romance or vulnerability. But then you showed up on that beach with your son and your sandcastle and your complete lack of pretense, and everything I'd convinced myself of started feeling like a lie." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I don't know how to do this. Dating, relationships, any of it. I'll probably be terrible at it. I'll definitely overthink everything and struggle with emotional availability and default to work when things get hard." Vivian's voice wavered. "But I want to try. With you. If you're willing to be patient with someone who's learning as she goes." Evan felt like the ground had shifted beneath him, like the world had reorganized itself into before and after this moment. "You want to date me?" "I want to see where this goes. Whatever this is, friendship or partnership or something we don't have words for yet. I want to explore it honestly instead of pretending we're both fine with professional boundaries." She met his eyes. "Is that something you want too?" Was it? Evan thought about his fears, his carefully constructed walls, all the reasons this could go wrong. But he also thought about Thursday mornings and shared laughter and the way Vivian made him feel seen in ways he'd forgotten were possible. "Yes," he said simply. "I want that too." Relief flooded Vivian's face. "Really?" "Really. Though full disclosure, I'm also terrible at this. I haven't dated in years. My last relationship ended in divorce. I come with significant baggage in the form of a 6-year-old who will definitely have opinions about any changes in my personal life. I like your baggage. Your baggage is charming and knows impressive facts about constellations. He's going to be thrilled when he finds out. He's been campaigning for this since the birthday party." "Smart kid," Vivian smiled, tentative but genuine. "So what happens now?" "Now we figure it out as we go. Take it slow, be honest with each other, try not to let work stuff complicate personal stuff too much." Evan paused. "And maybe, if you're comfortable with it, we could actually go on a date. Just the two of us. Something that isn't pizza with our kids as chaperones." "I'd like that. Though I should warn you, I have no idea what constitutes a good date. My last one was in graduate school and involved arguing about cantilever physics over bad wine." "We can work with that. I'm excellent at arguing about architectural principles. It's one of your most attractive qualities." They stood there in the parking lot, Evening settling around them, and Evan felt something unlock in his chest. Permission to want this. Permission to try. We should probably tell the kids, Vivian said. They're going to figure it out anyway, and Miles has apparently been providing regular updates to Emma. And Emma's been reporting back to Rachel. Our children are conspiring matchmakers. That's either adorable or concerning. Both, definitely both. They called the kids over. Miles and Emma approached with the wariness of children who knew something important was happening but weren't sure what. So, here's the thing, Evan started, then looked at Vivian helplessly. How did you explain adult relationships to kids? Evan and I are going to start spending time together, Vivian said, finding words where Evan had failed. Not just as friends, but as people who like each other. Romantically. Is that something you two would be okay with? Emma's face split into a grin. Like dating? You're going to date? Yes, dating. That thing adults do when they want to see if they're compatible as partners. I told you. Miles looked at Emma triumphantly. I told you they liked each other. You were right, Emma conceded. Very observant. So you're both okay with this? Evan wanted confirmation, needed to know this wasn't going to disrupt Miles's carefully constructed sense of stability. Dad, I've been telling you to ask her out for weeks. Of course I'm okay with it. Miles rolled his eyes with the exasperation of a 6-year-old who'd been proven right. Does this mean we get to have more play dates? Probably. If that's something everyone wants. Yes! Both kids cheered, then immediately started planning elaborate scenarios involving sleepovers and trips to the aquarium and whether this meant they were going to be siblings eventually. Slow down, Vivian said, laughing. We're taking this one step at a time. But eventually, Emma pressed, eventually we'll see what happens. That's how dating works. You spend time together, get to know each other better, and see if you want to keep doing it. And if you do keep doing it, then what? Then we figure out the next step when we get there. Vivian looked at Evan, something warm and uncertain in her expression. Together. The drive home that night felt different. Miles chattered in the back seat about Emma and the arcade and how this was definitely the best day ever, while Evan's mind replayed the conversation in the parking lot. Vivian wanted to date him, wanted to explore whatever this connection was between them, wanted to try despite fear and uncertainty and all the very valid reasons it could go wrong. He pulled into their apartment complex, helped Miles inside, supervised toothbrushing and pajama wrangling with the efficiency of years of practice. When Miles was finally tucked in bed, he sat on the edge of the mattress. You're really okay with this? Me dating Vivian? I'm more than okay. I'm happy. Miles's smile was sleepy but genuine. You've been sad for a long time, Dad. Not all the time, but sometimes, like you were missing something. And when you're with Vivian, you're not sad anymore. Evan's throat tightened. I'm not sad when I'm with you. I know, but that's different. That's dad and son happy. This is different happy, like you're finally doing something just for you, not just for me or for work. Miles yawned. You deserve to be happy too. When did you get so wise? I'm 6. I've had a lot of time to observe things. Evan kissed his forehead, overwhelmed with love for this small person who saw so much. Get some sleep, buddy. We've got library day tomorrow. And then the weekend. Are you going to see Vivian this weekend? Probably. We should probably plan an actual date at some point. Take her somewhere nice. Girls like nice places. I'll keep that in mind. After Miles fell asleep, Evan sat in his living room with the lights off, looking out at the city lights beyond his window. His phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. Thank you for tonight, for being willing to try this with me. Thank you for being brave enough to say something. I was working up to it, but you beat me to the punch. We can share credit for bravery. First time for everything. Evan smiled, typing his response. So, when's our first official date? Are you free Saturday night? Rachel offered to watch the kids. She's very invested in this working out. Saturday works. Any preferences on where? Surprise me. I trust your judgment. That simple statement, I trust your judgment, felt more significant than it probably should. Vivian Hart, who controlled every detail of every project, who planned meticulously and trusted sparingly, was handing him the reins for their first date. No pressure or anything. Evan spent the next 2 days alternating between excitement and panic. Where did you take someone like Vivian on a first date? Somewhere impressive enough to match her standards, but not so pretentious that it felt like trying too hard. Somewhere that allowed for actual conversation, but wasn't so quiet that silences would be awkward. Somewhere that acknowledged this was significant, without putting so much pressure on the evening that they'd both be nervous wrecks. In the end, he chose a small Italian restaurant in the North End that he'd been to once years ago. Intimate, but not stuffy. Excellent food without excessive formality. The kind of place where you could talk for hours without feeling rushed. Saturday night, Evan stood in front of his closet for the second time that week, trying to decide what you wore on a first date with someone who'd seen you in everything from work suits to beach shorts. He settled on dark jeans and a button-down shirt, casual enough to be comfortable but put together enough to show he'd made an effort. Miles approved the choice from his position on Evan's bed. "You look nice, Dad." "Very grown-up date, ready?" "Thanks, buddy." "You sure you're okay staying with Rachel and Emma tonight?" "Are you kidding? Rachel said we could make popcorn and watch movies and stay up late. This is basically a vacation. Don't abuse her hospitality." "I won't. I'll be observant and charming." Miles grinned. "Just like you taught me." Evan dropped Miles at Rachel's apartment at 6, endured Rachel's knowing smile and whispered, "Don't screw this up," and arrived at the restaurant exactly on time to find Vivian already there. She wore a dark blue dress that was somehow both elegant and understated, her hair down around her shoulders instead of pulled back. She looked beautiful and nervous, which made Evan feel slightly less terrified. "Hi," he said, suddenly awkward now that this was actually happening. "Hi," Vivian smiled. "You found it okay. GPS is a wonderful invention, shall we?" The hostess seated them at a corner table that offered privacy without isolation. Evan held Vivian's chair, a gesture that felt both old-fashioned and right, and tried to remember how dating worked. "I'm not good at this," Vivian said as soon as they were settled. "Small talk, first date conversation, any of it. Fair warning." "Me either. I think my last first date was 2015. Different era entirely. So we're both terrible at this. That's comforting." "We could skip the small talk," Evan suggested. "We already know each other. We know about work and kids and broken toasters. Maybe we just talk like we do on Thursday mornings." Relief flooded Vivian's face. "Yes, please, Thursday morning rules." So they did. They ordered wine and appetizers and fell into the easy rhythm of conversation that had become familiar over weeks of coffee and shared confidences. They talked about the Henderson Museum Project's timeline, about Miles's latest fascination with black holes, about Emma's determination to learn French because she'd decided she wanted to live in Paris someday. "She gets that from you," Evan said, "that absolute certainty about what she wants." "I was never that certain. I just pretended to be until the pretending became reality." Vivian swirled her wine. "Emma's different. She's bold in ways I never was. I think it's Rachel's influence. She's never been afraid of anything." "You're afraid of things?" "Constantly. I'm just good at hiding it." She met his eyes. "This, for example. Dating you. I'm terrified." "What scares you?" "That I'll be exactly as bad at relationships as I think I am. That I'll prioritize work and forget to show up emotionally. That you'll realize I'm not worth the complication." Vivian's voice dropped. "That I'll fall in love with you and you'll leave anyway because that's what people do." The honesty hit Evan square in the chest. "I'm scared too. That I'm not enough, that you'll get tired of my limitations and complicated life, that I'll screw this up the way I screwed up my marriage." "Your marriage ended because you married someone who didn't value the same things you do. That's not screwing up. That's learning. And your past relationships ended because you dated people who wanted you to be smaller than you are. That's their failure, not yours." They looked at each other across the table, seeing each other's fears and choosing to stay anyway. "So we're both terrified," Vivian said. "What do we do with that?" "We try anyway. We're honest when things are hard. We don't pretend everything is fine when it's not." Evan reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "We show up for each other the way we've been showing up, just with kissing eventually." Vivian laughed, surprised and genuine. "Eventually?" "I'm assuming kissing is part of the dating package. I could be wrong. It's been a while." Kissing is definitely part of the package. Though I should warn you, I'm probably terrible at that too. I seriously doubt that. You have a lot of faith in someone you've never kissed. I have faith in you, period. Evan squeezed her hand. We'll figure out the rest. Dinner stretched into dessert, dessert into coffee, coffee into the restaurant politely suggesting they might want to settle their bill. They'd talked for 3 hours straight, conversation flowing without pause, and Evan couldn't remember the last time he'd enjoyed an evening this much. They walked through the North End afterward. The summer evening still warm, streets filled with people enjoying the weekend. Vivian's hand found his somewhere between the restaurant and the waterfront, fingers intertwining like it was the most natural thing in the world. "This is nice," she said quietly. "Just walking. No agenda, no purpose except being together. We should do it more often." "Are you asking me on a second date already?" "I'm asking for as many dates as you'll give me." Evan stopped walking, turning to face her. The waterfront stretched behind them, city lights reflecting off dark water. "I meant what I said earlier. I'm all in on this, whatever this becomes. Even though it's complicated and we work together and there are kids involved and approximately 17 ways it could go wrong, especially because of all that, the complicated stuff is what makes it real." Vivian looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Then she stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "I'm going to kiss you now, if that's okay." More than okay. She kissed him softly, tentatively, like she was testing uncertain ground. Evan's hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like promise and possibility and the beginning of something they were building together. When they finally pulled apart, Vivian was smiling. Not terrible at that after all. Definitely not terrible. Actually quite excellent. Excellent enough for a repeat performance? Absolutely. They kissed again there on the waterfront, taking their time, learning each other in this new context. When they finally separated, Vivian rested her forehead against his. "I'm still terrified," she admitted. "Me too. But less than before." "Yeah, less than before." Evan walked her to her car, kissed her goodbye one more time, and drove to Rachel's apartment feeling like the world had reorganized itself into something brighter. He found Miles and Emma asleep on the couch, Rachel reading in the armchair. "Good date?" she whispered. "Really good date." "I told you, my sister's crazy about you." Rachel smiled. "She called me from the restaurant bathroom to panic about whether she was doing it right." "She did?" "Yep. I told her to stop overthinking and just be herself. Looks like it worked." Evan carefully scooped up Miles, who barely stirred. "Thank you, for watching him, for pushing Vivian, for all of it. That's what family does, and you're family now, whether you realize it or not." Rachel walked them to the door. "Don't screw this up, Evan. She doesn't let people in easily, but when she does, she's all in." "I know, I won't." He carried Miles to the car, drove home through quiet streets, and got his son into bed without fully waking him. His phone buzzed as he was brushing his teeth. "Best first date I've ever had. Thank you for being patient with me." Evan smiled, typing his response. "Thank you for being brave enough to try." "Same time next week?" "It's a date." The second date happened 4 days later because neither of them could wait until the following weekend. Then a third date the week after that. Then dating became a regular rhythm woven into their already intertwined lives. Thursday morning coffee that sometimes ended with kisses in the empty office. Saturday dinners when the kids were with Rachel. Stolen moments between meetings where Vivian would stop by Evan's desk just to see him. They were careful at work, maintaining professional boundaries in front of colleagues, but word spread anyway. Office gossip being what it was, people noticed the way Vivian smiled more, the way Evan carried himself with new confidence, the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. Sarah Chen cornered Evan in the break room 3 weeks into the relationship. "So, you and Vivian Hart." "Me and Vivian Hart," Evan confirmed, not bothering to deny it. "I have so many questions, starting with how and when, and are you insane?" Insane is definitely on the list of possibilities. Evan poured his coffee, trying not to smile too obviously. "But it's good, really good. She's your boss. That's like a whole HR nightmare waiting to happen." We've been careful, disclosed the relationship to the partners, established boundaries about work projects, made sure there's no conflict of interest. Evan had spent hours with HR working out the logistics, making sure everything was above board. It's complicated, but we're managing it. You look happy, Sarah said, her skepticism softening into something like approval. Happier than I've ever seen you. So maybe insane is working for you. Maybe it is. The Henderson Museum project broke ground in late August, complete with a ceremony that involved speeches and symbolic shovels, and Catherine Morrison declaring that this was the beginning of something extraordinary. Evan stood beside Vivian as Catherine praised the design, feeling pride that was almost overwhelming. "This is your triumph," Vivian murmured as the speeches concluded. "Own it." "Our triumph. I couldn't have done this without you." "You could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." Miles and Emma attended the ceremony, dressed up and trying very hard to be well-behaved. They lasted approximately 20 minutes before getting distracted by the construction equipment and lobbying to sit in the excavator. "Absolutely not," Evan said. "But Dad, when are we ever going to get another chance to sit in construction equipment?" "When you're old enough to operate it legally. That's like 1,000,000 years from now." 13 years, actually. Patience, buddy." Rachel laughed, swooping in to redirect the kids toward the refreshment table. "Come on, troublemakers. Let's see if they have those fancy cookies you like." Vivian watched them go, her expression soft. "Your son is going to be an engineer or a negotiator, possibly both. As long as he's happy, I don't care what he becomes." Evan slipped his hand into hers, a gesture that still felt thrilling in its newness. "Thank you for this. For pushing me to take the lead on this project, for believing I could do it." "I didn't make you capable, Evan. I just gave you the platform to show everyone else what I already knew." "Which is?" "That you're extraordinary, in every way that matters." They stood together in the afternoon sun, watching the beginning of something they'd built together, and Evan felt the rightness of it settle in his bones. This was what he'd been working toward, not just professional success, but the feeling of being seen and valued and celebrated by someone who understood exactly what this achievement meant. The celebration continued at Vivian's place that evening, the first time Evan had been to her apartment, a stunning space in a renovated brownstone that somehow managed to be both elegant and welcoming. Rachel had taken the kids to a movie, giving the adults time to themselves. "I was expecting something more minimalist," Evan said, looking around at the warm colors and comfortable furniture that contradicted the Ice Queen reputation Vivian had cultivated at work. "Everyone expects minimalist. I spend all day in sleek glass offices. Home gets to be different." She poured wine, handing him a glass. "Besides, Rachel decorated most of it. Left to my own devices, I probably would have gone with minimalist and regretted it. It suits you, the real you, not the work persona. I'm still figuring out who the real me is. Turns out I've been performing a role for so long that peeling back the layers is harder than expected." Vivian settled on the couch beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You make it easier, though. You've seen me at my worst and somehow still stick around. Your worst is still pretty impressive, and I happen to like all the layers." Evan set down his wine glass, turning to face her properly. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Where do you see this going? Us, I mean, long term?" Vivian was quiet for a moment, considering. "Honestly, I don't know. I've never been good at long-term planning when it comes to relationships. Work? Yes. Buildings? Absolutely. But people are unpredictable." "That's not an answer." "I know." She met his eyes. "What I can tell you is that I want this to keep going. That I wake up looking forward to seeing you. That I think about you constantly in ways that are probably interfering with my productivity. That Miles and Emma are already planning our wedding, and I'm not immediately terrified by that prospect." "They're planning our wedding?" "Apparently it involves a castle made of chocolate and a guest list that includes their entire school. I've learned not to interfere with their creative process." Evan laughed, the tension breaking. "For what it's worth, I want this to keep going too. I'm not in a rush to define every step, but I'm also not interested in casual. This matters to me. You matter to me." "You matter to me too." Vivian leaned in, kissing him softly. "Can that be enough for now? Just knowing we both want to see where this goes, that's more than enough. They spent the evening talking and kissing and learning each other in the quiet of Vivian's apartment, away from kids and work and the outside world. When Evan finally left around midnight, Miles was sleeping at Rachel's, but Evan wanted to be there when he woke up. He felt like something fundamental had shifted. They weren't just dating anymore. They were building something real, something that could last. September brought new challenges in the form of Jennifer's renewed custody demands. She'd been quiet through August, which Evan had foolishly interpreted as acceptance. Instead, she'd been gathering ammunition. The paperwork arrived on a Tuesday, delivered to his office by courier. A formal petition for modified custody arrangements, citing Evan's unstable work environment and inappropriate workplace relationship as grounds for reconsidering the existing agreement. Evan read through it twice, fury building with each word. Jennifer had done her homework, documenting every late meeting, every schedule change, even the museum groundbreaking ceremony where Evan had been photographed holding Vivian's hand. She was arguing that his relationship with his boss demonstrated poor judgment and created an unstable environment for Miles. "She's grasping at straws," Martha said when Evan called her immediately. "A consensual relationship between two adults is not grounds for custody modification. And she's going to have a very hard time arguing that your work environment is unstable when you just landed the biggest project of your career. But she's trying. She's actually doing this. She's posturing, trying to scare you into compliance." Martha's voice was firm. "We fight back. I need documentation of everything: your custody time, Miles's well-being, his school performance, the stability you've provided. Can you get that to me by Friday?" "Yes, absolutely." Evan hung up and immediately called Vivian, who was in meetings but picked up anyway when she saw his number. "What's wrong?" "Jennifer filed papers. She's trying to modify custody, and she's using our relationship as ammunition." The silence on the other end stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then Vivian's voice came back, cold and controlled in a way that would have terrified Evan if it had been directed at him. "Where are you?" "My office." "Stay there. I'm coming to you." She arrived 10 minutes later, closing his door and reading through the papers with the focused intensity she brought to contract negotiations. When she finished, her expression was dangerous. "This is retaliation. She knows she's losing him and she's trying to hurt you in response. She's using us against me, our relationship. A relationship she has no grounds to object to. You're not putting Miles in danger. You're dating someone who cares about his well-being and has actively contributed to his happiness." Vivian set down the papers. "We fight this together." "Vivian, I can't ask you to get involved in my custody battle." "You're not asking. I'm volunteering. Miles is important to me. You're important to me. I'm not going to stand aside while his mother tries to manipulate the system because she's insecure about her choices." The conviction in her voice steadied something in Evan's chest. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm furious on your behalf, which means I'm going to channel that fury into helping Martha destroy Jennifer's arguments." Vivian pulled out her phone. "I'm going to write a statement about your work performance, your character, and the positive impact your relationship has had on both your professional growth and Miles's well-being. Martha can use it however she needs." Over the next 2 weeks, they built a case that was airtight. Martha gathered testimonies from Miles's teachers praising Evan's involvement. Rachel provided a statement about the positive changes in both families since Evan and Vivian started dating. Even Catherine Morrison from the museum board wrote a letter attesting to Evan's professional excellence and character. The preliminary hearing happened on a gray October morning. Evan sat beside Martha in the courthouse, watching Jennifer and her expensive lawyer present their arguments about instability and poor judgment. He listened to them twist his relationship with Vivian into something sordid and inappropriate, paint his work schedule as neglectful, suggest that Miles would be better off with more time in New York. Then Martha stood up and systematically dismantled every argument. She presented evidence of Evan's consistent custody time, Miles's excellent school performance, the stable home environment documented by teachers and counselors. She entered Vivian's statement into evidence. 3 pages of detailed professional assessment that made Evan sound like Father of the Year. She played the recording of Jennifer's threatening phone call where she'd explicitly stated this was about control, not Miles's well-being. By the time Martha finished, Jennifer's lawyer looked like he regretted taking the case. The judge took 30 minutes to review everything, then delivered her ruling. Ms. Walker, I find your petition for custody modification to be without merit. Mr. Hale has demonstrated consistent, loving parenting. His professional relationship with Ms. Hart is documented as appropriate and has been properly disclosed to relevant parties. The stability of his home environment is well evidenced. The existing custody arrangement will remain in place. Relief flooded through Evan so intensely he felt dizzy. It was over. Jennifer had lost. Outside the courthouse, Martha pulled him aside. She might try again. People like her don't give up easily. But we'll be ready. We'll be ready, Martha confirmed. And Evan? You're a good father. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. Vivian was waiting in the parking lot, having taken the afternoon off despite Evan's protests that she didn't need to be there. She stood when she saw him, searching his face for the verdict. We won, he said simply. She crossed the distance between them in seconds, pulling him into a hug that felt like coming home. Of course you did. You're an excellent father and she had no case. Thank you for the statement. Martha said it made a real difference. I just told the truth. Vivian pulled back to look at him. Are you okay? I'm better than okay. I'm free. She can't use Miles as a weapon anymore. Evan felt laughter bubble up, unexpected and genuine. I'm actually free. They celebrated that night at Vivian's place with takeout and wine, and Miles, who didn't fully understand what had happened but knew his dad was happy. Emma joined them, and the kids spent the evening building an elaborate blanket fort in Vivian's living room while the adults tried to have grown-up conversation. This is my life now, Vivian observed, watching Emma and Miles drape sheets over furniture with chaotic enthusiasm. Blanket forts and chicken nuggets and children's laughter echoing off my expensive hardwood floors. Having regrets? Not even a little bit. She leaned against Evan's shoulder. This is better than anything I imagined for myself. Messier, definitely. Louder, but better. Even when Emma insists the fort needs structural reinforcement and Miles starts citing engineering principles he learned from YouTube? Especially then. Rachel arrived around 8 to collect Emma, taking in the scene with obvious satisfaction. Look at you two, playing house like actual grown-ups. We're supervising fort construction, Vivian corrected. That's different. Sure it is, Rachel grinned. Emma, time to go. School night. But, Aunt Viv, the fort isn't finished. It needs a flag and a drawbridge, and it will still be here next time. Come on, kiddo. After Rachel and Emma left, Evan got Miles ready for bed in Vivian's guest room, a space that had slowly accumulated some of Miles's things over the past month. A toothbrush in the bathroom, pajamas in the dresser, books on the nightstand, the gradual accumulation of a life being lived together. Dad? Miles said as Evan tucked him in. Are you and Vivian going to get married? The question shouldn't have surprised him. Miles had all the subtlety of a freight train, but it still caught Evan off guard. Would you want that? Yeah, I like her. And Emma's basically my best friend already. It would be cool if we were actually related. Miles paused. Plus you're happy when you're with her. Like really happy. Not just pretending. I am happy, but marriage is complicated. It's a big decision that takes time. How much time? I don't know yet. We're still figuring things out. But you love her, right? Evan's breath caught. He and Vivian hadn't said those words yet, both of them cautious about moving too fast, both carrying baggage that made declarations feel risky. Yeah, buddy, I love her. Does she know? Not yet. I'm waiting for the right moment. You should tell her. People like knowing they're loved. Miles said it with the wisdom of someone twice his age. It makes them feel safe. Out of the mouths of children. Evan kissed his forehead. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just notice it more now. Evan found Vivian in the kitchen, cleaning up the dinner debris. She looked up when he entered, smiling in a way that made his heart do complicated things. He settled okay? He's got opinions about our relationship timeline. Let me guess. He wants to know when we're getting married and whether Emma can be in the wedding. Close. He wanted to know if I love you. Vivian went very still, dish towel forgotten in her hands. What did you tell him? The truth. Evan crossed the kitchen, stopping close enough to see the flecks of gold in her eyes. That I do. Love you. I'm completely, terrifyingly in love with you. Terrifyingly? You're Vivian Hart. Loving you is the emotional equivalent of free climbing Everest. Exhilarating and potentially deadly, and absolutely worth the risk. She laughed, surprised and genuine. That's the worst romantic declaration I've ever heard. I'm out of practice. Give me credit for trying. You get full credit. Vivian set down the dish towel, stepping into his space. For the record, I'm terrifyingly in love with you too. Have been for weeks. I just didn't know how to say it without sounding like I was reciting a corporate presentation on emotional attachment. I would absolutely attend that presentation. It would have charts and footnotes, very professional. She kissed him softly. I love you, Evan. You and your broken toaster, and your impossible juggling act, and your son who's basically the best human ever created. That's better than my declaration. I've had more time to prepare. You just sprung this on me mid-dish washing. They stood in her kitchen, arms around each other, and Evan felt something settle in his chest. This was right. This was what he'd been moving toward since that absurd day on the beach, when the wind had blown Vivian's wrap and changed everything. The weeks that followed felt like falling into place. Evan and Vivian found their rhythm as a couple, balancing work and parenting and relationship with increasing ease. The office adjusted to their partnership, and the initial gossip faded into acceptance. The kids conspired constantly, their friendship deepening into something that looked a lot like sibling affection. Thanksgiving approached with the complicated logistics that came with blended families. Jennifer wanted Miles for the holiday, which was technically her right according to their custody schedule. But for the first time, Evan didn't feel anxious about sharing time. You should go to New York, he told Miles. Spend time with your mom and Richard, their family too. But I'll miss Thanksgiving with you and Vivian and Emma. We'll have our own celebration when you get back, I promise. Miles went to New York and returned full of stories about the Thanksgiving parade and fancy restaurants and a puppy that Richard's parents had. He seemed happy, settled, comfortable moving between his two worlds. I think she's actually trying, Miles reported. Mom, I mean. She asked about school and my friends, and she didn't check her phone as much. That's good, buddy. I'm glad. She asked about you and Vivian, if you were serious. What did you tell her? I said you were definitely serious, that Vivian makes you smile and we hang out with her and Emma all the time and you're basically a family now. Miles paused. She looked sad, but not mad sad, just regular sad. Evan felt an unexpected pang of sympathy for his ex-wife. Jennifer had chosen her path, but that didn't mean she wasn't human, wasn't capable of regret or loneliness or wondering what might have been different. Your mom loves you, Evan said. That never changed. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that seem right at the time but feel complicated later. Do you ever regret divorcing her? I regret that it hurt you. But no, I don't regret the divorce. Your mom and I weren't good together. We wanted different things. Sometimes the brave thing is admitting when something isn't working. Miles processed this with his characteristic thoughtfulness. And you and Vivian, you want the same things? We do. We want to build something together, support each other, be present for you and Emma, create a life that makes us all happy. That sounds good. I like that plan. Me too, buddy. December brought the company holiday party, a formal affair at a hotel downtown that Evan had always skipped in previous years. This year, Vivian insisted he attend, and more specifically, that he attend as her date. Everyone knows we're together, she argued. We might as well make it official in a social context. You want to arrive at a work function together, as a couple? I want to stop pretending there's a meaningful separation between who we are at work and who we are everywhere else. Vivian pulled out her phone, showing him the invitation. Plus, I need someone to make fun of Carl from accounting's terrible dancing with me. Rachel's busy, and you're excellent company. So Evan found himself at the company holiday party in his best suit, arriving with Vivian on his arm and trying not to feel self-conscious about the attention it drew. But Vivian handled it with her usual grace, introducing Evan as her partner in the comprehensive sense, professional colleague and romantic companion both. You look nervous, she murmured as they navigated the cocktail hour. Everyone's staring. Let them. We're not doing anything wrong. Vivian squeezed his hand. Besides, Half of them are staring because they're trying to figure out how you convince the Ice Queen to thaw. The other half are jealous. You were never an Ice Queen, just selective about who got to see the real you. Same thing, different framing. She smiled. Dance with me? They moved to the dance floor as the band started playing something slow and romantic. Evan pulled Vivian close, one hand on her waist, the other clasping hers, and let the music carry them. I've been thinking, Vivian said quietly, her head resting against his shoulder. Dangerous activity. Hush. I'm being serious. She pulled back slightly to look at him. I've been thinking about the future, about what I want it to look like. And I want it to look like this. You and me, Miles and Emma, building something together. Not rushing, but also not pretending we don't know where this is heading. Vivian's voice was steady but vulnerable. I want to wake up next to you. I want to navigate parenting challenges together. I want to design a life that works for all of us. Evan's heart was racing. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm saying that I'm ready. When you are. However you want to do it, but I wanted you to know that I'm all in on this. On us. On whatever version of family we want to create. I'm all in too. Have been for months. Evan stopped dancing right there in the middle of the dance floor with half the company watching. Vivian Hart, I love you. I want to build a life with you. I want the complicated logistics and the blended family chaos and the future we're going to create together. Is this a proposal? It's a declaration of intent. The actual proposal will involve more planning and probably input from two 6-year-olds who have opinions. Vivian laughed, bright and joyful. That sounds perfect. They resumed dancing, and if people were staring before, they were definitely staring now. But Evan found he didn't care. This was his life, imperfect and complicated and absolutely worth celebrating. The actual proposal happened 2 months later, orchestrated with help from Miles and Emma, who took their roles as co-conspirators very seriously. They returned to Crescent Bay Beach on a Saturday in February, bundled against the cold but determined to recreate the place where everything started. The kids built a sandcastle with architectural precision, incorporating everything they'd learned from Vivian about structural integrity. And when it was complete, towers and moat and working bridge and all, Evan pulled out the small box he'd been carrying. Vivian Hart, you've changed my life in ways I never imagined. You saw something in me I didn't see in myself. You made space for Miles in your world. You taught me that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. He opened the box, revealing a ring they'd designed together, because Vivian had opinions about jewelry design. Will you marry me? Vivian was crying, which was something Evan had seen maybe twice in all the months they'd been together. Yes, absolutely yes. Miles and Emma cheered. Rachel, who'd been hiding behind a dune with a camera, emerged to document the moment. And Evan slipped the ring onto Vivian's finger there on the beach where everything had started with an embarrassing accident and a child's innocent invitation. We're getting married, Emma announced to the entire beach. My Aunt Viv and Miles's dad are getting married, and we're going to be sisters. Cousins, technically, Vivian corrected, but she was smiling through tears. Close enough. They took family photos on the beach, all 5 of them, because Rachel had inserted herself into the narrative and no one had the heart to protest. Then they went for pizza at the same place they'd celebrated the birthday party, and the kids monopolized the conversation with wedding planning ideas that ranged from practical to completely absurd. You have to get married on the beach, Miles insisted, where Dad proposed. In February, we'll freeze, Vivian pointed out. Summer beach wedding then, July or August. Emma was already planning. And we need flowers, lots of flowers, and a cake with multiple tiers, and dancing. We'll take all suggestions under advisement, Evan said diplomatically. That means they're going to do whatever they want, Miles told Emma. I know, but they'll feel bad about ignoring our ideas, so we have negotiating power. Rachel laughed. These kids are going to run the world someday. They're going to run our lives, that's for certain, Vivian agreed. They did get married on the beach that July, with Miles and Emma as joint best person and maid of honor respectively. Catherine Morrison attended, along with what felt like half of Boston's architectural community. Rachel officiated after getting ordained online specifically for this purpose, and she managed to get through the ceremony with only minimal teasing. Do you, Vivian Elizabeth Hart, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, Through late-night design sessions and sandcastle construction and all the beautiful chaos that comes with blended family life? I do. And do you, Evan James Hale, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold through impossible deadlines and family logistics and the adventure of loving someone as brilliant and stubborn as my sister? Absolutely, I do. Then by the power vested in me by the internet and the state of Massachusetts, I now pronounce you married. Kiss already. They kissed on the beach where everything started, surrounded by people they loved, and Evan felt the rightness of it settle in his bones. This was his family now, Vivian and Miles and Emma and Rachel and the chosen community they'd built together. The reception happened at a restaurant overlooking the harbor, with toasts that made Vivian cry again and dancing that lasted until the kids crashed from sugar and excitement. Evan and Vivian snuck away around 10, leaving Miles and Emma in Rachel's capable hands, and walked along the waterfront in their wedding clothes. "We did it," Vivian said, leaning against him. "We actually got married." Having regrets already? Not even close. I'm just amazed we got here. From that ridiculous beach accident to this. Best accident of my life. Mine too. She stopped walking, turning to face him. Thank you for being patient with me, for seeing past the armor I wore, for making space for me in your life even when it was complicated. Thank you for taking a chance on us, for being brave enough to try even when you were terrified. Evan kissed her softly. I love you, Mrs. Hale. I love you too, though professionally I'm keeping Hart. Too much brand recognition to change it now. I wouldn't dream of asking you to change it. You're Vivian Hart, brilliant architect, surprisingly excellent stepmother, and the love of my life. Stepmother feels so formal. Can we go with bonus mom? I like that better. Emma's been calling you mom for 3 months. I think that ship has sailed. Vivian smiled, that genuine expression that transformed her entire face. I like being Emma's mom. I like being Miles's bonus mom. I like this whole messy, complicated family we've created. Me too, though I reserve the right to panic occasionally about whether I'm doing it right. We'll panic together. That's what partners do. They walked back to the reception hand in hand, ready to rejoin their celebration and their family and the life they were building together. Inside, Miles and Emma had rallied from their sugar crash and were teaching the museum board members some dance they'd learned at camp. Rachel was laughing with Sarah Chen, probably sharing embarrassing stories about both the bride and groom. The restaurant was full of love and laughter and the kind of joy that came from people genuinely happy to witness a beginning. Evan pulled Vivian onto the dance floor one more time, holding her close as the band played their song. Something about building dreams and taking chances and love that lasted. I can't believe this is my life, he said quietly. Believe it. You deserve every bit of this happiness. So do you. Then we're both very lucky. Vivian rested her head on his shoulder. Here's to building something that lasts, brick by careful brick. Together, Evan confirmed. Always together. And there on the dance floor, surrounded by family and friends and the future they'd chosen, Evan Hale felt something he hadn't felt in years, complete. Not because everything was perfect, but because the imperfections were shared. The challenges were faced together. The joy was multiplied by partnership. He'd started this journey as a single dad trying to give his son one perfect day at the beach. He was ending it as a husband, a father, a partner in building both buildings and a life that mattered. Somewhere between the sandcastle and the ceremony, between the fear and the courage to try anyway, he'd found his way home. And that home looked like Vivian's smile, like Miles's laughter, like Emma's enthusiasm and Rachel's teasing and Thursday morning coffee and family dinners and all the small moments that accumulated into a life worth living. The band played on. The celebration continued. And Evan danced with his wife, grateful for wind and accidents and children who saw possibility where adults saw only complications. Grateful for second chances and new beginnings and the extraordinary gift of being loved exactly as he was. This was enough. This was everything. This was the family they'd built together, one careful brick at a time, strong enough to weather any storm. And it was just the beginning.